Story 1. The story is titled, My Brother Framed Me, My Family Disowned Me. And even after the truth came out, they stayed out of contact. But now they're reaching out because they need my help, so I took over their business. Hey everyone! Before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. Hey folks, been lurking here for a while, so I figured it's my turn to share the chaos. Alright, so this is one of those family screw-ups where no matter what you do, you're always the bad guy. Let's just say, if you've ever dealt with golden child syndrome, you'll probably relate. So yeah, buckle up. This one's a wild ride. Growing up, it was pretty obvious my family had a favorite. My 29 male older brother, Tyler, 31 male, could do whatever the hell he wanted, and nobody blinked an eye. Me? Different story. Our parents owned a small hardware store in town. They had us working there as soon as we could carry a toolbox. Fair enough, I guess. But it didn't take long to see how things really worked. Tyler got the easy stuff, ringing people up at the register, chatting with customers, or hanging out in the back pretending to do paperwork. Meanwhile, I was the one unloading trucks, hauling heavy boxes, and stacking shelves till my arms ached. If something broke, somehow that was my fault. If money went missing from the register? Yeah, guess who got blamed? The guy had a habit of skipping shifts without consequences. He's got a lot going on, my parents would say. But if I showed up 5 minutes late, you need to take this job seriously. Classic double standard. After a while, I stopped expecting things to be fair. Outside of work, Tyler wasn't much better. He treated my stuff like his personal stash. I'd walk outside to see my car gone, only for him to show up hours later with the tank on empty. If I called him out, he'd just laugh it off. Relax, man. It's not a big deal. And my parents? He's your brother. Don't be so selfish. Every damn time. It wasn't just small stuff either. One time, I saved up for a brand new power drill. Top of the line. Next thing I know, Tyler's borrowed it for some side job, and it comes back busted. Told him to replace it, but he just shrugged. It still works, doesn't it? Parents backed him up. It was an accident. Don't make a big deal out of it. After that, I started locking my tools in my truck just to keep him from getting his hands on them. The worst part was how they acted like Tyler could do no wrong. If he screwed up, there was always some excuse. Forgot to lock up the store one night? He must have been tired. Short on cash from the till? Maybe the register was off. Meanwhile, if I so much as looked at the clock during a slow shift, it was, you need to stay focused. Somewhere along the line, Tyler's screw-ups were getting far. He got into gambling, sports bets, poker nights, and God knows what else. Didn't take long before he started dipping into the hardware store's cash to cover his losses. I found out when I noticed the till coming up short more often than usual. Tried to mention it to Dad once, thinking maybe it was a mistake, but he just waved it off. Tyler's going through a rough patch. Don't make a big deal out of it. Rough patch or not, the missing cash kept adding up. Meanwhile, I had to cover the difference more than once, taking it out of my own paycheck just to avoid another lecture about responsibility. Tyler, of course, never got so much as a slap on the wrist. Mom just kept saying, he's under a lot of stress. He needs our support. Guest support included turning a blind eye while he treated the register like his personal ATM. Things boiled over one night after we closed the store. Tyler dipped early, again, leaving me to unload a shipment by myself. It wasn't just a few boxes either. Pallets of lumber, bags of cement mix, and enough hardware to stock the shelves for a month. By the time I locked up, my back felt shot. I drove home, found Tyler in the garage digging through Dad's toolbox drawers, the ones where he sometimes stashed extra cash. I didn't need to guess what he was looking for. Tyler had a habit of borrowing money when his gambling debts started piling up. Looking for tools or cash this time? I said. He didn't even look up. Mind your business. Yeah? Register's been short all week. You think no one noticed? I'll pay it back. Like last time? I stepped closer. How much this time? Poker? Football bets? He stepped closer, like he wanted to square up. At least I'm not busting my ass hauling boxes for minimum wage. Maybe if you took a few risks, you wouldn't be stuck scraping by. Before I could think, I shoved him, and we clashed. We scuffled, knocking over a stack of paint cans and making enough noise to bring Mom and Dad running. They burst into the garage just as I shoved Tyler against the wall. Mom yelled for us to stop, and Dad stepped between us, looking straight at me like I was the one who'd screwed up. I tried to explain about the missing money, but Dad cut me off saying he didn't want to hear it. Said Tyler was under a lot of stress and that I needed to stop making things harder for him. Same excuse as always. I walked out before I said something I'd regret. After that night, I knew I needed to get out of that house. I kept my head down, worked my shifts, and tried to save up enough cash to get my own place. I wasn't looking for handouts, I just wanted out. But of course, things didn't go the way I planned. Around that time, my grandparents started having health problems. Grandpa's arthritis made it tough for him to get around, and Grandma needed medication that wasn't cheap. They'd always been good to me, never picked sides like my parents did. To help cover expenses, they'd stashed about $10,000 in a safe at their house. Not exactly the smartest move, but they didn't trust banks after getting burned during some financial mess years back. Tyler started visiting them more often, playing the caring grandson routine. I figured he was just buttering them up. He had a habit of using people when he needed something. Meanwhile, I barely had time to visit between shifts at the store and side jobs I picked up to boost my savings. Then, one weekend, the money vanished. No break-ins, no forced entry, just gone. The whole family went into panic mode. Grandpa was tearing the house apart, convinced the safe had to be somewhere else. Grandma could barely speak. Everyone started tossing around theories, but it didn't take long before fingers started pointing. I was unloading a shipment at the store when my phone buzzed. "Dad, get to the house, now," he said. No explanation, just hung up. By the time I got there, the living room felt like an interrogation room. My parents sat on the couch, Grandma and Grandpa next to them. And then there was Tyler, arms crossed like he already knew how this was going to play out. Dad didn't waste time. $10,000 is missing. Your grandparents need that money for their medical bills. Tell us what happened. I don't know what to tell you, I said. I didn't take anything. Mom shot me a look like I'd just spit on the carpet. Tyler said he saw you near the safe last time you visited. You've been struggling with rent lately. Maybe you got desperate. Just tell the truth so we can move on. I glanced at Tyler. He just stood there with that same blank expression he always had when he knew he was about to get away with something. I told them that I wouldn't steal from Grandma and Grandpa, and that I don't even visit so often. Dad, not believing a word of me, said, "Then prove it. Pay the money back. Until you do, don't bother coming around. They can't be serious. How do they want me to prove something I didn't even do? They really believed I did such a thing without even having any evidence. I don't have 10 grand lying around," I said. "Then figure it out." Dad shot back. Grandparents were silent. Nobody said a word. I waited, hoping someone would step up. But the silence just dragged on until Dad nodded toward the door. "Go pack your stuff," he said. I stood there for a second, half expecting someone to stop me. Nobody did. I turned and walked out to my car. By the time I got home, they'd already tossed my stuff into the trunk. Bags of clothes, a few tools, and whatever else they thought was mine. Tyler showed up just as I was about to drive off. He stood on the porch, watching like he was waiting to see me crack. For a second, I thought about calling him out, telling everyone what kind of guy he really was. But what was the point? They'd already made up their minds. Tyler pointed fingers at me. Everyone believed him. That was enough for me to understand there's no place for me here anymore. I drove off without looking back. The next few weeks were rough. Getting kicked out wasn't some dramatic, life-changing moment. It was more like getting shoved into a pit and realizing no one was coming to pull you out. The apartment I moved into wasn't much. Bare walls, secondhand furniture, and a fridge that sounded like it was on its last legs. Rent ate up most of my paycheck from the construction job I'd picked up after leaving the store. I didn't have much left after bills, so dinner was usually instant noodles or whatever, was on sale at the grocery store. The hardest part wasn't the work, though. It was the silence. My parents didn't just cut me off. They made sure everyone else did too. Calls went straight to voicemail, texts got ignored, and the invites to family gatherings stopped coming. Even friends I'd known for years started pulling away, like they didn't want to get caught in the middle. I stopped reaching out after a while. Figured if they didn't want me around, I wasn't going to beg for their attention. If they thought I couldn't make it without them, they were about to find out how wrong they were. I picked up extra shifts wherever I could, fixing decks, patching roofs, remodeling kitchens. The more jobs I took, the more I learned. Carpentry, plumbing, electrical work. I soaked up every bit of knowledge I could get my hands on. YouTube tutorials, construction manuals, watching the older guys on site, whatever it took. The pay wasn't great, but it kept me moving. Every busted knuckle and sleepless night felt like a step toward a debt I owed myself, and I was determined to pay it off. Nights were the worst. After working all day, I'd come home too tired to do much besides collapse on the couch. I kept grinding. Every extra shift, every side gig, every dollar saved, it all added up, little by little. Jeremy, my cousin, was the only one from the family who stuck around. He never bought the whole thief story, probably because he knew what kind of guy Tyler really was. Jeremy worked construction too, so he helped me land a few bigger jobs. When I needed an extra set of hands on weekends, he was the first one to show up. Having someone in my corner helped, but I wasn't leaning on anyone. Every dollar I made went straight back into upgrading my tools and truck. No flashy spending, no wasted cash. It wasn't long before I had to make a choice: stick with my construction crew job or go all in on my own thing. I walked into the site office, handed in my notice, and drove home knowing there was no backup plan. No steady paycheck, just me and whatever jobs I could land. But that was the point. No safety net, no excuses. Going solo wasn't easy. Roofing in the summer heat, crawling under houses to fix busted pipes, hauling drywall until my shoulders ached, none of it was fun, but I didn't care. Every job meant more cash, more skills, and more clients spreading my name around town. There was this one job that stuck with me, the one that really got things rolling. This guy hired me to build a custom deck on his lake house. The job had to be perfect. No shortcuts, no mistakes. I spent 2 weeks measuring, cutting, and building, working late into the evening with only a flashlight when the sun went down. By the time I finished, my hands were raw, and I was running on fumes. But the guy was impressed enough to start recommending me to his clients. Turns out he was a real estate investor with properties all over the county. Suddenly, I wasn't just fixing decks. I was remodeling rental properties, flipping houses, and handling renovation contracts that paid more in a month than I used to make in 3. Real estate investors started calling, and that's when things really took off. With more jobs coming in, I needed help. Hired a couple of guys I trusted. No slackers, no complainers. We tackled everything from bathroom remodels to full-scale renovations. I made sure we did every job right the first time. No cutting corners, no rushing to finish early. Reputation mattered more than price, and I wasn't about to screw that up. The money started rolling in faster than I could spend it. First thing I did was upgrade my truck. Nothing flashy, just a solid workhorse with enough space for tools and materials. Bought better equipment too. Table saws, power drills, everything I needed to handle bigger jobs. I even picked up a trailer to haul lumber and debris, saving me time and money on every job. Every dollar that didn't go into tools or gas went straight into savings. No fancy dinners, no vacations. Just slow, steady progress. I was too busy working to spend money anyway. 7 days a week, sun up to sundown, I was either on a job site or lining up the next gig. Didn't have much of a social life, but it wasn't my priority. Meanwhile, Tyler was still circling the drain. His gambling problem wasn't a secret anymore. Word around town was that he owed money to half the guys he used to hang out with. A few of them even showed up at the store looking for him. But my parents covered for him, same as always, convinced he'd get back on track any day now. Didn't bother me. I had bigger things to worry about. A year in, I had more work than I could handle. Started turning down smaller jobs just to keep up with the bigger ones. Home remodels, commercial renovations, even a few custom builds, the kind of work that paid enough to keep my crews busy for weeks at a time. I bought a second truck, hired more guys, and expanded my crew to 3 teams. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. 3 crews running jobs across the state, pulling 6 figures a year, and living in a house I owned outright. All built from nothing. No handouts, no shortcuts. Success didn't happen overnight. In a couple of years, I wasn't just remodeling houses, I was handling multi-unit properties, office buildings, and retail spaces. But it didn't mean I forgot where I came from. Every time I drove past my parents' store, I remembered the nights I spent unloading trucks while Tyler sat in the back pretending to do paperwork. I remembered the look on his face when I drove away that day. The smirk. The satisfaction of knowing he'd gotten away with it. And every time I thought about slowing down, I remembered that moment and pushed even harder. With the money rolling in, I expanded fast. Bought more trucks, hired more guys. Carpenters, electricians, plumbers. I kept my crews lean. No slackers, no dead weight. If a guy couldn't pull his weight or started showing up late, he was gone. Simple as that. I didn't have time to babysit anyone. Every job had to be done right the first time. My cousin, Jeremy, stayed in the picture, helping with networking and landing clients. The guy knew everyone: property managers, real estate developers, even a few city officials. Thanks to him, I scored a contract with a developer building luxury condos downtown. That one job alone pulled in more money than my entire first year of side gigs. After a few years of running my own business, I didn't think much about my family anymore. My days were packed with renovation projects, managing crews, and chasing deadlines. I barely had time to sleep, let alone dwell on what happened. But every now and then, Jeremy would fill me in. Turns out, Tyler had tried to start his own handyman business at one point, Probably figured if I could do it, so could he. But surprise, surprise, it didn't last long. Poor management, missed deadlines, and a reputation for cutting corners killed any chance he had. Clients started leaving bad reviews, word spread, and soon nobody wanted to hire him. The funny thing was, I didn't feel much of anything about it. No satisfaction, no sense of justice, just indifference. I was too focused on my own life to care. But karma has a way of showing up when you least expect it. It all came to a head one summer during a family get-together. I wasn't there, hadn't been invited to a family event in years, but Jeremy filled me in later. Apparently, Tyler showed up already looking rough. He was nursing the kind of stress that comes from owing money to people who don't forget debts. But, true to form, he couldn't keep his mouth shut. After a few too many drinks, he started bragging, talking about his big wins and how he was going to turn things around soon. And then he slipped up. Maybe he thought no one would catch it, or maybe he was just too far gone to care. But somewhere in the middle of his rambling, he let it slip that he'd borrowed the money from Grandpa's safe to cover a gambling debt. Thought he'd win big and put it back before anyone noticed. Only the winning part never happened. Grandpa didn't yell or make a scene. He just stood up, looked Tyler square in the eye, and told him to leave. No more handouts, no more second chances. Grandma didn't say anything, just sat there with her hands folded in her lap, looking like she'd already known the truth all along. Tyler tried to talk his way out of it, said he'd pay them back once he got back on his feet. Nobody bought it. My parents, true to form, tried to smooth things over. He's going through a rough patch. We just need to support him. He is just drunk and babbling random stuff. But Grandpa wasn't having it. Don't make excuses for him. He stole from us and threw it on his brother. That's the kind of man he is. That was the end of it. Tyler left, slamming the door behind him. Nobody followed. When Jeremy called to tell me, I didn't say much. Just let the news settle in. I wasn't surprised. I'd suspected Tyler from the start, but hearing the truth out loud still hit differently. Not because it changed anything. My family had already made their choice years ago. But there was a part of me that felt satisfied. I asked Jeremy how the rest of the family reacted. Turns out, most of them just wanted to move on. Nobody talked about how they'd all stood by while I got kicked out. Nobody brought up the fact that they'd cut me off without a second thought. It was like they all just wanted to pretend none of it had ever happened. The only one who seemed to care was Grandpa. A few days after the blow-up, he called me for the first time in years. I almost didn't pick up. Thought maybe he wanted to smooth things over like nothing had happened. He didn't say much, just asked how I was doing, if business was going well. I could hear the strain in his voice, like he wasn't sure what to say. Finally, after a long pause, he said, I should have spoken up that day. I knew you didn't take that money, but I guess I didn't know how to go against the rest of the family. I didn't say much in response, just told him I was doing fine. Maybe if he'd called years earlier, things would have been different. But by then, I'd already built a life without them. I didn't need their apologies. After that, I didn't hear from him again. Jeremy told me later that Grandpa stopped coming to family gatherings as often. Guess the whole thing hit him harder than anyone realized. As for Tyler, things didn't get any better. Last I heard, he was still bouncing between jobs, trying to scrape together enough to keep the lights on. Nobody wanted to hire a guy with a reputation for stealing from his own family. Even the people he used to gamble with stopped loaning him money. Word gets around fast in a small town. My parents kept their distance too. Whether it was guilt or pride, I didn't know. But they never reached out. Not until the day they needed something from me. A few months after the bug news at the family gathering, life had settled into a rhythm. Business was still booming. Between managing contracts, overseeing job sites, and keeping up with payroll, there wasn't much time for anything else. Not that I minded. The grind was the only thing that kept me grounded. Then one evening, my phone buzzed while I was going over invoices at my kitchen table. I froze. It was my dad. I hadn't heard from him in years. For a second, I thought about letting it go to voicemail. But something told me to answer. Hey, it's been a while, he said. He sounded like he wasn't sure how to start. Yeah, it has. What's up? I kept my tone flat. No point in pretending this was a social call. After a few minutes of him pretending to care and apologizing for tossing me aside, years ago, he finally spit, well, the store's hit a rough patch. Some unexpected expenses came up, and we're having trouble keeping up with the bills. I heard you've been doing well. Thought maybe you could help out. Maybe invest a little to keep things running? The audacity got me staring for a moment, to be honest. The same guy who kicked me out without proof was now asking for my money. Part of me wanted to laugh and hang up without another word. But instead, I just said, I'll think about it, and ended the call. That's where some brilliant idea came to me. So I called them 1 week later, and we agreed to meet up. We met at a diner near the old neighborhood. Mom and Dad sat across from me, looking worn down. No apologies, no acknowledgement of the past, just awkward small talk until Dad finally got to the point. The bank's calling in our loans, he said. If we can't come up with the money, we'll lose the store. We need an investor, someone we can trust. I let the silence stretch out just long enough to make them squirm. Then I laid out my terms. I'd pay off the debts, but I wanted 51% ownership, majority control, full authority to hire, fire, and make any decisions I saw fit. No exceptions. They were stunned at first. Of course, they expected me to help under no conditions and just throw my money at them. They wanted to argue, but I cut them off before they could start. Take it or leave it. That's the only way I'd accept helping you. But if you leave it, the store's done. For a moment, neither of them said anything. I could see the struggle in their eyes, the ego clashing with the reality of their situation. But ego doesn't pay the bills. After a long pause, he nodded. All right, Dad said. They signed the papers right there in the diner. Just like that, I became the owner of the business they once kicked me out of. Taking control of the store didn't feel like some big victory at first. It was just another job, another challenge to tackle. But as the weeks went by, the reality of it started to sink in. I wasn't just running the place, I owned it. The same building where I used to haul boxes and mop floors was now mine. Every decision, every paycheck, every dollar of profit, it all came through me. First thing I did was go through the books. The place was a mess. Missed payments, bad inventory orders, and deals that should have never been signed. I spent the next week tearing through every account, cutting unnecessary expenses, and locking down the budget. No more freebies for family, no more favors that cut into profits. Then I moved to cleaning house. Tyler had to go first, but there were still a few employees who'd gotten too comfortable slacking off. They clocked in late, took long breaks, and acted like they were doing me a favor just by showing up. I gave them a week to shape up. Most of them didn't, so they were gone. No warnings, no second chances. I needed people who understood that this wasn't the same store it used to be. Once the staffing issues were sorted, I turned my focus to the finances. The books were worse than I expected. Overdue bills, bad supplier contracts, and enough wasted inventory to fill a warehouse. I spent hours going through every account, cutting unnecessary expenses, and renegotiating deals with suppliers. Some of them tried to push back, thinking they could take advantage of the new owner, but I made it clear that those days were over. Either they gave me better terms, or I'd take my business elsewhere. Most of them caved, the ones who didn't got replaced. With the finances under control, I tackled the inventory. Half the shelves were stocked with items that nobody bought. Cheap tools, outdated equipment, and random hardware that had been collecting dust for years. I cleared it all out, slashed prices to move the dead stock, and used the cash to bring in products that customers actually wanted. I added new lines of power tools, high-quality building materials, and specialty items that contractors couldn't get anywhere else in town. As for Tyler, it was time to give him what he fucking deserved. He was the first to go. I didn't waste time. Walked into his office Monday morning and dropped the termination letter on his desk. Your last paycheck. You're done here. You can't do this, he shouted. I cut him off. Yes, I can. And I just did. Security walked him out while the staff watched. Nobody defended him. Nobody even looked surprised. With Tyler gone, I turned my focus to the rest of the business. Sales picked up almost immediately. Contractors started coming in more often because they knew we had what they needed, and homeowners appreciated the better selection and cleaner store. I made sure the place looked professional. Organized shelves, clear signage, and a checkout process that didn't take half an hour. I even invested in a new point-of-sale system to speed things up and keep better track of inventory. Within 6 months, the store was back in the black. Sales were up, expenses were down, profits were up by nearly 20%. By the end of the year, the store was pulling in more revenue than it had in the last 5 years combined. Suppliers started offering me better deals, and local contractors began recommending us to their crews. Word spread fast that the store was under new management, and that this time, things were done right. And my parents? They stayed on as employees. No special treatment, no extra perks. They clocked in and out like everyone else. If they didn't like it, they knew where the door was. I made it clear from day one. This wasn't a family favor. This was a business. For the first time in years, I didn't feel anger or resentment. Just a sense of closure. I'd built my success without them. And now, every time they walked into that store, they'd know exactly who they answered to. Meanwhile, Tyler's downward spiral didn't slow down. No job, no money, and no more handouts from mom and dad. Last I heard, he was working part-time at a warehouse across town, barely scraping by. Nobody wanted to hire a guy with his reputation, not after the gambling debts, missed shifts, and burned bridges. Even the people he used to hang out with had stopped returning his calls. He'd used up all his favors and then some. Well, couldn't say I felt bad. Mom and Dad never said much about him, but I could tell it weighed on them. They never asked me to help Tyler, though. Not after everything that had happened. Maybe they knew better. It didn't matter. Tyler had made his choices, and now he was living with the consequences. I wasn't about to waste my time trying to save someone who once tried to ruin my life. As for the rest of the family, most of them kept their distance. A few relatives started showing up at the store again once they heard I was running it, but the conversations were always short and awkward. Nobody brought up what had happened with the money, and nobody apologized for turning their backs on me. It was like they all wanted to pretend it had never happened. Fine by me. I wasn't interested in rehashing the past. But Grandpa was different. He stopped by one afternoon, unannounced. I was in the middle of unloading a shipment when I saw him standing near the entrance. For a second, I thought about pretending I hadn't seen him, but he came over. He stood there in awkward silence for a moment. Finally, he cleared his throat. "Place looks good," he said. "Thanks," I replied. Then he continued. "I should have spoken up that day. I knew you didn't take that money. But, well, I think I didn't have the courage to stand against the crowd. I just nodded. Save it. I'm doing good after all." Maybe if he'd said those words years ago, things would have been different. But standing there, surrounded by the business I'd built with my own two hands, I realized I didn't need his apology. I'd already proven everything I needed to prove. After a few more minutes of small talk, he left. I never saw him again after that. Jeremy told me later that Grandpa had stopped going to family gatherings and kept to himself for the most part. Maybe the guilt was too much, or maybe he just got tired of the drama. Either way, I didn't care. By the time the next year rolled around, the store was running like a well-oiled machine. Profits were steady, and the customers knew they could count on us. I kept building my construction business, running 3 solid crews while managing the store on the side. These days, I don't think much about the past. Life's better than ever, built on my own terms. And that felt so damn good. Edit. Wow, didn't expect this to blow up. Thanks for reading and for all the comments. Appreciate the support. To those asking, no, I haven't heard from Tyler in a while. Last I heard, he's still bouncing between jobs. As for my parents, they've learned to keep things professional at the store. We're civil, but that's about it. Life's good, and I'm just focused on what's next. Thanks again, y'all. Story 2. My cousin's wife slapped my 17-year-old daughter. "You are not real family, you don't deserve to be here," she said. Here's how karma destroyed her entire life. This happened 2 years ago during New Year's Eve 2023, but I'm finally ready to tell the whole story. My cousin's wife slapped my 17-year-old daughter over a pair of limited edition sneakers, and what happened next completely destroyed their marriage, finances, and social status. The best part? I barely had to lift a finger. Karma did most of the work for me. Before I dive into this insanity, let me give you some background so you understand why this situation was so messed up from the start. This isn't just about one slap. It's about years of entitlement, manipulation, and toxic behavior that finally caught up with someone who thought they were untouchable. I, 43 male, have been running my own roofing and general contracting business here in Phoenix for the past 16 years. Started with absolutely nothing but a beat-up 1998 Ford F-150, some basic tools I bought at pawn shops, and a willingness to work 14-hour days in 115-degree Arizona heat. Now I employ 52 people across 3 crews, and we pull in about $4.1 million annually. Not bad for a guy who learned the trade from YouTube videos, library books, and pure stubbornness. The early years were brutal. I remember eating peanut butter sandwiches for dinner, because every dollar had to go back into equipment and supplies. Slept in that old truck more nights than I care to admit, when I couldn't afford both gas money and a motel room. But I knew if I could just survive those first few years, I'd build something real. I'm divorced. My ex-wife Rachel left me in 2018 when the business was struggling during a recession. She thought she was trading up for some finance guy with a steady salary and benefits package. Rachel always cared more about appearance than substance. Wanted the white picket fence lifestyle without understanding the work it takes to build it. Joke's on her, though, because that finance dude got laid off 6 months later when his company downsized. Meanwhile, my company not only survived but came back stronger than ever. Sometimes the trash really does take itself out. My daughter Emma lives with me full-time, by her own choice. When the divorce happened, the judge gave her the option since she was 15 at the time. She chose to stay with me without hesitation. Said she'd rather live with someone who actually cared about her future instead of someone obsessed with keeping up with the neighbors. That decision still makes me proud every single day. Emma's 17 now, honor roll student, plays varsity volleyball, and works part-time at a local fitness center to save money for college. This kid understands the value of hard work because I made sure she learned it early. She's been helping me sort screws, organize tools, and clean up job sites since she was 8 years old. Not because I needed free labor, but because I wanted her to understand that everything worthwhile requires effort. Emma's not one of those spoiled teenage girls you see posting on TikTok all day. She buys her own clothes with money she earns, does her own laundry, cooks dinner twice a week, and actually appreciates what she has. When she wanted a car for her 16th birthday, I told her she could earn half the money, and I'd match it. Took her 8 months of working weekends and summer vacation, but she saved up $4,500. Now she drives a reliable 2015 Honda Civic that she maintains herself, changes the oil, checks the tire pressure, keeps detailed maintenance records. The girl has goals too, wants to study business administration, and eventually take over my company when I retire. We spend evenings going over job estimates, employee schedules, and profit margins. She asks smart questions about expansion plans and investment strategies. At 17, she understands more about running a business than most college graduates. Now here's where the story gets interesting and why what happened later made my blood boil. My cousin Derek works as a mechanical engineer for a major defense contractor here in Phoenix. Makes around $155,000 annually, which is solid money in Arizona. Derek's always been a good guy, smart, hardworking, reliable, but honestly kind of awkward with women. He spent most of his 20s focused on his career, didn't date much, never learned to spot red flags when it came to relationships. That's probably how he ended up married to this absolute disaster named Brittany 3 years ago. Derek was 35, desperate for companionship, and completely unprepared for what hit him. Brittany is 26 years old, though we later discovered she's actually 29 and lying about her age. Bottle blonde with obvious plastic surgery, and one of those Instagram influencer types with about 55,000 followers. Her entire existence revolves around posting bikini photos from expensive locations, unboxing designer products she can't afford, and promoting whatever scam supplement company pays her $200 to post a sponsored story. She calls it building her brand and entrepreneurship, but really she's just a professional gold digger who struck it rich with a lonely engineer who didn't know any better. This woman has never worked a real job in her entire life. While Derek's putting in 50-hour weeks designing aircraft components and defense systems, Brittany's at home taking selfies and spending his entire paycheck on designer handbags, jewelry, and lease payments for her white BMW. She's got Derek completely convinced that her social media career is going to make them rich someday. Shows him fake screenshots of other influencers making millions. Talks about brand partnerships that are just around the corner. Promises that her follower count is about to explode. Meanwhile, her actual monthly earnings are maybe $300 on a good month, mostly from desperate supplement companies targeting her few thousand real followers. The thing that really bothers me is how Brittany treats Emma whenever we're at family gatherings. She's constantly making these passive-aggressive comments about Emma's practical clothing choices, suggesting she needs makeup and highlighting, questioning why she works instead of just asking me for money. Last summer at a family barbecue, she actually told Emma she'd be really attractive if she put some effort into her appearance and maybe got some professional help. Like, lady, my daughter doesn't need your approval to exist in this world. Emma handles it with more grace than Brittany deserves. But I can see how these comments affect her. No 17-year-old girl should have to deal with some gold-digging wannabe influencer questioning her worth. Brittany also has this 16-year-old daughter, Madison, from a previous relationship with some deadbeat who disappeared the moment child support became an issue. Madison is basically a smaller, more entitled version of her mother. Materialistic, demanding, genuinely believes the world owes her everything because she happens to be conventionally attractive. Derek pays for everything in Madison's life now. Private school tuition at $18,000 per year, designer clothes, latest iPhone every time a new model comes out, professional dance lessons, horseback riding lessons, whatever the princess demands. This kid has never been told no in her entire pampered life. Madison throws screaming tantrums when she doesn't get exactly what she wants, talks down to service workers like they're subhuman, and genuinely believes she's superior to other people because her stepdad has money. She's never worked a day in her life, never been held accountable for anything, never faced a single real consequence for her behavior. The biological father is nowhere to be found, naturally. Probably some other sucker who got trapped by Brittany's act and escaped before the financial damage got too severe. So Derek's been stuck playing daddy to someone else's spoiled brat, while Brittany drains his bank account and destroys his self-respect. So New Year's Eve 2023 rolls around, and my brother Kevin decides to host a family party at his place in Scottsdale. Kevin's a radiologist who does very well for himself. Bought this beautiful 4,500 square foot house with a pool, 3-car garage, and mountain views. The whole suburban dream setup that takes most people decades to afford. Usually these family gatherings are pretty relaxed affairs. Kevin's wife makes incredible food, we play some cards, watch football, count down to midnight on TV. Nothing fancy, just family spending time together without any drama or stress. Emma and I arrived around 7 p.m. on December 31st. She was wearing these brand new Air Jordan 4 black canvas sneakers that she'd been saving up for since September. These particular shoes cost her $420 of her own money, earned from working 15 hours a week at the fitness center while maintaining a 3.9 GPA and playing varsity volleyball. Here's what makes these shoes special. They're part of an extremely limited release that Nike only produces in small quantities. When they dropped in December 2023, they sold out in literally 3 minutes across every retailer in the country. Emma had been entering online raffles, joining waitlists, and setting alarm clocks for months trying to get a pair. She finally succeeded through Nike's SNKRS app after probably 50 failed attempts. By the time we got to Kevin's house that evening, these exact shoes were already reselling for $750 to $800 on StockX, GOAT, and other sneaker platforms. Emma was one of maybe 200 people in all of Arizona who managed to get them through the official retail release. The moment we walked through Kevin's front door, I spotted Derek's white BMW in the circular driveway and felt my mood shift slightly. Don't get me wrong, I love Derek like a brother, but dealing with Brittany's personality at family events is exhausting. Sure enough, she was already holding court in the spacious living room with some of my female relatives, showing off her new Cartier Love bracelet that probably cost Derek 3 months of overtime pay. Madison was sprawled across Kevin's expensive leather sectional scrolling through TikTok with this bored, superior expression like she was too sophisticated for family gatherings. She was wearing a complete designer outfit that probably cost more than most people make in a month. Golden Goose sneakers $500, some designer jeans I didn't recognize but probably $300 plus, and a Balenciaga hoodie $800. All purchased with Derek's credit card, naturally. The first thing Brittany said when she spotted Emma walking in was, "Oh wow, Emma, those are actually really cute shoes. Where did you get them, Target?" Then she laughed like she'd made some incredibly witty joke. The dismissive tone was obvious to everyone in the room. Emma just smiled politely and explained she'd gotten them through Nike's app after months of trying. She didn't mention the price or how hard they were to find. Emma's not the type to brag about material things. I watched Madison's head snap up from her phone when she heard Nike and months of trying. This girl knows expensive sneakers when she sees them. Derek's probably bought her 30-plus pairs over the past 2 years. Everything from limited edition Jordans to 1,200 Balenciaga trainers. Madison got up from the couch and walked over to examine Emma's feet more closely, like she was inspecting a museum piece. "Wait, those are the black canvas 4s," Madison said with sudden, intense interest. "I wanted those so bad, but Derek said I already have too many shoes." She said it with this whiny victim voice, like she was being somehow mistreated by only having 3 walk-in closets full of designer footwear. Emma mentioned how she'd been working extra shifts at the gym and saving every dollar for months to afford them. You'd think that would earn some respect from a girl who's never worked a day in her life, right? Absolutely wrong. Madison just rolled her eyes like the concept of earning something through labor was beneath her consideration. "That's so weird," she said. "Why would you work when you could just ask your dad to buy them?" "That's what I do." Emma patiently explained that I believe in teaching her responsibility and the value of money. Madison looked genuinely confused by this concept, like I'd just explained quantum physics to a toddler who couldn't grasp basic arithmetic. "But that's like so much work," Madison said, "and it takes forever. Derek just buys me whatever I want when I want it. That's what parents are supposed to do." We somehow made it through dinner without any major incidents. Kevin had spent all day smoking his famous brisket, and the whole extended family was having a genuinely good time sharing stories, catching up on each other's lives, and enjoying the relaxed atmosphere. I was actually starting to think maybe this would be one of those rare drama-free family gatherings where everyone behaved like adults. How wrong I was. After dessert and coffee, Brittany announced she had special surprise gifts for the teenage girls in the family. She disappeared into Kevin's guest bedroom and returned with these elaborate gift bags filled with tissue paper, presented with the kind of theatrical fanfare you'd expect from someone desperate for attention. Madison tore into her gift bag immediately like a kid on Christmas morning, ripping through the tissue paper without any care for the mess she was making on Kevin's expensive carpet. She pulled out this elaborate Fenty Beauty makeup palette set, probably $180 worth of high-end cosmetics, including eyeshadows, lipsticks, and highlighting powders. Madison barely mumbled a thanks before immediately ripping open all the packages and starting to test colors on her hand, getting makeup all over Kevin's white leather furniture. No appreciation, no genuine gratitude, just immediate consumption like she deserved these expensive gifts. Emma opened her gift bag more carefully, folding the tissue paper neatly and setting it aside. Inside, she found a $30 gift card to Bath & Body Works, along with some drugstore lip gloss that probably cost $4. The difference in value was so obvious, it was almost insulting. Designer makeup worth nearly $200 for Madison, drugstore scraps worth maybe $35 for Emma. But Emma handled it with pure class, thanking Brittany genuinely and putting the gift card carefully in her purse without any visible disappointment. She even complimented the lip gloss color, saying she'd never tried that particular shade before. That's when Madison noticed Emma's Jordan 4s again and got that calculating, covetous look in her eyes that I'd seen before. "I'm literally obsessed with those shoes," Madison announced loud enough for the entire room to hear. She said literally, the way teenage girls do when they don't understand what the word actually means. "They would look so much better with my outfits anyway. I actually go places where people notice fashion and take photos." The entitlement was absolutely breathtaking. This girl had literally just received $180 worth of free makeup and was already demanding someone else's property because she thought she deserved it more. Brittany immediately jumped in to support her daughter's demands. "Oh, honey, maybe Emma would let you borrow them sometime? You girls are practically the same shoe size, aren't you? It would be so sweet if you could share." Emma politely explained that she doesn't lend out her shoes, especially ones she worked so hard to afford. She said it respectfully but firmly. Completely reasonable response from any normal person who understands property rights. But Madison wasn't having it. "Come on, it's not like you have anywhere important to wear them. I have a sweet 16 party next month with actual Instagram influencers coming. These shoes would be perfect for my photos, and I'd get way more likes than you ever could." The audacity was completely unreal. This spoiled brat thought because her stepdaddy had money, she automatically deserved whatever caught her fancy. The idea that someone might want to keep their own possessions was apparently foreign to her. When Emma held firm on keeping her own property, Madison looked to her mother for backup with this expectant expression, like she was calling in reinforcements. That's when Brittany's true nature started showing through the fake nice act. "Emma, sweetie, Madison really loves those shoes, and she doesn't get to see you very often because you live so far away. Wouldn't it be nice to share with family? Derek works very hard to provide for all of us, and Madison has such important social events coming up." My brother Kevin sensed the tension building in his living room and tried to change the subject by asking about everyone's New Year's resolutions. But I could see exactly where this was heading. These people genuinely believed they could guilt trip and pressure my daughter into giving up something she'd earned through months of hard work. "The shoes stay with Emma," I said firmly, keeping my voice calm but making my position crystal clear. "She bought them with her own money." Brittany put on this shocked, wounded expression like I'd just suggested we burn down Kevin's house. "Oh, Tyler, I didn't realize you were raising Emma to be so selfish with family members. That's really sad." The room went quiet. Several relatives looked uncomfortable with the direction this conversation was taking. But Brittany wasn't finished making her true character known to everyone present. The entire room went dead quiet after Brittany called Emma selfish for wanting to keep her own shoes. I felt my jaw clench and my hands form fists, but I was trying to keep my cool because Emma was watching how I handled this situation. She needed to see that you can stand up for yourself and defend your principles without losing control. Madison, seeing her mother backing her up and sensing weakness, decided to get more aggressive with her demands. "I'll trade you," she told Emma with this fake generous tone. "You can have my makeup palette for the shoes. That's like a really good deal for you since makeup is what girls actually need." Emma pointed out calmly that she doesn't wear much makeup, and besides, the shoes cost significantly more than the cosmetics. Basic math and logic, right? The shoes retailed for $420 and were worth $800+ on resale, while the makeup was maybe $180 retail. That's when Madison completely dropped her mask and showed her true entitled nature. "So what if they cost more? Derek makes like 6 figures. We can afford way more expensive stuff than you guys can ever dream of. The absolute audacity of this spoiled brat talking about money that wasn't even remotely hers. She was bragging about her stepdad's salary like she'd earned a single dollar of it herself through any kind of effort or contribution. And Derek just sat there saying absolutely nothing, while his stepdaughter openly disrespected my family in front of everyone. Brittany decided to escalate the situation even further, clearly thinking she could use social pressure to get what her daughter wanted. Madison, honey, I think those shoes would be absolutely perfect for your Sweet 16 party next month. All the influencer kids from your private school will be there, plus we're hiring a professional photographer. Imagine how amazing the photos would look. She turned to Emma with this fake sweet smile that made my skin crawl. Emma, you'd want Madison to look her best for such an important milestone birthday, wouldn't you? You're family, after all. You can always buy another pair when you save up enough money again. With what money? Emma asked reasonably. I'd have to work for another 3 months to afford these again, and they might not even be available anymore since they're limited edition. Well, maybe that would teach you better money management skills and the value of hard work, Brittany snapped, finally dropping the pretense of being nice and showing her true ugly personality. That was absolutely the last straw. I stood up immediately and told Emma we were leaving right now. The whole family was staring at us like we'd just announced we were joining some kind of cult, but I didn't care anymore. These people were toxic and entitled, and I wasn't subjecting my daughter to another minute of their psychological abuse. We're done here, I announced to the room. Emma, get your jacket. As we walked toward Kevin's front door, Madison jumped up from the expensive sectional and actually blocked Emma's path like some kind of highway robber. You're not leaving with those shoes. I want them, and I should have them. I deserve them more than you do. This spoiled girl actually reached down and tried to physically grab Emma's foot to untie the shoelaces. Emma stepped back in shock and confusion, but Madison lunged forward more aggressively, trying to physically remove the shoes from my daughter's feet right there in the middle of Kevin's living room. Madison, stop! Derek finally said something, but it was too little too late. That's when Brittany completely lost her mind and showed everyone exactly who she really was underneath the fake Instagram influencer act. She marched over and slapped Emma hard across the face with an open palm, the sound echoing through the suddenly silent room like a gunshot. Don't you dare disrespect my daughter! She screamed at my child, who was now holding her cheek with tears forming in her eyes and a bright red handprint across her face. The entire party went dead silent. 20 adults were staring in absolute shock at what had just happened. Even Madison stopped trying to grab the shoes and looked confused about whether she should be happy or scared. Derek finally found his voice and said, Brittany, what the hell was that? But his tone was more confused than angry, like he couldn't process what his wife had just done. But it was already way too late for apologies or explanations. I had my phone out and was dialing 911 while staring directly into Brittany's eyes, letting her see exactly how serious this had just become. She was about to learn that actions have consequences, especially when you assault someone's child. The police arrived in exactly 9 minutes, which felt like an absolute eternity, while I stood there comforting Emma and watching Brittany pace around Kevin's living room like a caged animal who suddenly realized she'd made a terrible mistake. 2 officers responded to the domestic disturbance call, an experienced male sergeant who looked like he'd handled thousands of these situations, and a younger female officer who immediately took charge of documenting everything properly. They separated everyone into different rooms for individual questioning, but before that process started, the female officer took detailed photographs of the bright red handprint across Emma's left cheek from multiple angles. The mark was clearly visible and obviously fresh, making it impossible for anyone to claim this was some old injury or accident. Here's what saved us from a he said she said situation, and made this an open and shut case: Kevin's comprehensive home security system. He's got Ring doorbell cameras covering the front entrance, plus additional cameras monitoring the back patio and main living areas where we'd been gathered. Everything that happened was recorded in crystal clear HD video with audio, including Brittany calling Emma selfish, Madison physically trying to remove the shoes, and the actual assault itself from multiple angles. The audio was clear enough to hear every word of the conversation leading up to the violence. The male sergeant reviewed the security footage on Kevin's tablet while taking detailed statements from everyone present. When he watched the part where Brittany slapped Emma, his entire demeanor shifted from routine domestic call to serious criminal matter requiring immediate action. Ma'am, you're under arrest for assault on a minor, he informed Brittany in a tone that left absolutely no room for argument or negotiation. Derek started panicking immediately, begging the officers to just let it go and claiming it was all a big misunderstanding between family members. She's never done anything like this before, he kept saying. This isn't who she really is. But Brittany made everything infinitely worse by arguing with the police officers, insisting that Emma had provoked her by being disrespectful to Madison and refusing to share. She actually told the cops that Emma needed to learn some manners and that parents have a right to discipline disrespectful children. Madison was crying and screaming that it was all Emma's fault for not sharing her shoes like a good person should. Real classy behavior from this spoiled princess who'd never faced consequences for anything in her pampered, entitled life. They handcuffed Brittany right there in Kevin's living room, while the entire extended family watched in stunned, horrified silence. Derek looked absolutely humiliated as his wife was led away in custody, and I'll admit I felt a surge of deep satisfaction watching this entitled woman finally face some real accountability. Child Protective Services arrived about 45 minutes later to document everything officially and ensure Emma's safety. The caseworker was a seasoned professional who'd clearly handled thousands of these family violence situations throughout her career. She took additional photographs of Emma's injuries, interviewed her privately in Kevin's study to get her unfiltered account of what happened, and reviewed all the security footage independently to verify the facts. During her thorough investigation, the caseworker discovered some very interesting information about Madison's behavior patterns at her expensive private school. Turns out this spoiled kid had been systematically bullying classmates over designer clothing and accessories, threatening to get her rich stepdad to sue families who couldn't afford expensive brands. She'd been telling other students that poor people deserved to be poor because they didn't work hard enough, and that anyone wearing non-designer clothes was embarrassing themselves by coming to school. The private school administration had been trying to contact Brittany for weeks about these serious behavioral incidents, but she'd been consistently ignoring their calls and emails. 3 days later, Brittany was formally arraigned in county court and had to post $7,500 bail that Derek covered with money from their joint savings account. But the criminal charges were just the beginning of their rapidly mounting problems. Emma's volleyball coach had seen the arrest video, which somehow ended up circulating on social media despite our attempts to keep it private, and connected me with a family attorney who specializes in civil litigation involving assault cases. Within 1 week, we'd filed a comprehensive lawsuit for assault, intentional infliction of emotional distress, harassment of a minor, and creating a hostile family environment. The attorney was confident we had an excellent case given the video evidence and witness testimony. But the real entertainment was just getting started, because the story was about to go viral on the internet in ways none of us anticipated. Remember how Brittany calls herself an influencer, with 55,000 followers on Instagram and constantly brags about her social media empire? Well, someone at Kevin's party, we never found out who, posted the security footage of her arrest on TikTok, and it absolutely exploded across social media platforms. The video hit 1.0, 8 million views in the first 24 hours. By day 3, it was approaching 4.2 million views, with over 800,000 shares across TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. The comment section was absolutely brutal and hilarious. Imagine being this entitled over your stepdad's money. Gold digger attacks child over shoes she didn't even buy. This is why you don't marry Instagram wannabes. Poor Emma just wanted to keep what she earned. Madison's behavior is exactly what I'd expect from this family. Derek needs to run from this crazy woman. Brittany tried desperately to control the narrative by posting a series of long Instagram stories claiming she was being attacked by toxic family members, and that the video didn't show the full context of Emma being deliberately provocative and disrespectful. But this backfired spectacularly because internet users love nothing more than exposing fake influencers, and people immediately started digging into her background with the dedication of professional investigators. Here's what the social media detectives uncovered within 48 hours. She'd been married twice before Derek, both times to men with substantial incomes who divorced her for financial irresponsibility and manipulative behavior. Madison's biological father was actually paying $800 a month in child support that Brittany never told Derek about, money she'd been pocketing. She'd been using Derek's credit cards to fund a secret shopping addiction, totaling over $60,000 in hidden debt. Her actual influencer income was averaging $180 per month, not the $2,000 plus she'd been claiming to justify her lifestyle. She'd been lying about her age. She was actually 29, not 26 as she claimed on all her social media profiles. Several of her brand partnerships were with companies that had never heard of her. The brand sponsorships evaporated overnight. Companies absolutely do not want to be associated with viral videos of adults assaulting children, regardless of the circumstances. Her follower count started dropping like a stone, $55,000 to $41,000 to $28,000 to $15,000, as people realized she was completely fake. Derek began receiving messages from both of her ex-husbands, warning him about her established patterns of financial manipulation, emotional abuse, and pathological lying. Apparently, she'd pulled identical stunts with both previous marriages, maxing out credit cards, demanding expensive gifts, throwing violent tantrums when denied anything, then playing the victim when confronted. Meanwhile, the criminal case was progressing rapidly through the court system. The prosecutor decided to pursue maximum charges due to the viral nature of the incident, the clear video evidence, and Brittany's complete lack of remorse or accountability. Then Derek made a discovery that changed everything and opened his eyes to who he'd really married. While looking for tax documents in their shared home office, he found credit card statements that Brittany had been hiding from him in a locked file cabinet. She'd opened 7 different credit accounts using his income information and social security number without his knowledge or consent. The total fraudulent debt was absolutely staggering: $73,000 in unauthorized charges for designer clothes, jewelry, spa treatments, expensive dinners, luxury hotel stays, and cash advances. She'd even been using the cards to send money to her mother and pay for Madison's extracurricular activities that Derek thought were being covered by her business income. Derek also discovered that Brittany had been making elaborate promises to Madison about their future financial arrangements. She'd been telling the girl that Derek was planning to legally adopt her and pay for her college education at whatever expensive university she wanted to attend. Derek had never agreed to any of this. He'd never even discussed adoption, and the college fund promises were completely fictional. The kid had been planning her entire future around financial commitments that existed only in her mother's manipulative imagination. 4 weeks after the arrest, Derek called me sounding completely defeated and emotionally drained. He was filing for divorce and wanted to know if Emma would be willing to testify about Brittany's long-established pattern of entitled and manipulative behavior toward our family. Emma absolutely agreed to help Derek escape this toxic situation. 6 months later, the criminal trial took place at the Maricopa County Courthouse downtown. With HD security footage showing Brittany slapping Emma, there really wasn't much to debate legally. The evidence was overwhelming, undeniable, and crystal clear. Brittany's court-appointed attorney tried desperately to argue that she'd been provoked by Emma's disrespectful attitude and deliberate antagonism, but the video clearly showed Emma being polite, reasonable, and respectful throughout the entire interaction leading up to the assault. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours before finding her guilty on all charges. They later told reporters that the video evidence made it impossible to reach any other conclusion, and several jurors expressed disgust at Brittany's complete lack of remorse. She received 120 days in county jail, 300 hours of community service, $12,000 in fines and restitution to Emma, and 2 years of supervised probation with mandatory anger management classes. The judge specifically noted that adults who assault children deserve the full weight of the law regardless of any claimed provocation. But the civil lawsuit was where we really dismantled her entire life and exposed the full scope of her fraudulent behavior. My attorney subpoenaed all of Brittany's financial records going back 5 years and uncovered a systematic pattern of fraud, theft, and financial manipulation that went far beyond what we'd initially suspected. She'd been forging Derek's signature on credit applications, using his social security number without permission to open accounts, stealing money from their joint checking account for fake business expenses, and even intercepting and cashing his tax refund checks. The divorce proceedings were absolutely devastating for Brittany in every possible way. Derek hired a forensic accountant who meticulously documented that she'd stolen over $127,000 during their 3-year marriage through various elaborate schemes. She'd been selling designer gifts that Derek bought her and keeping the cash for herself, taking money from their joint account to pay for her mother's rent and car payments, and using business credit cards for personal expenses while claiming tax deductions. Here's my absolute favorite part of this entire story: what happened to precious little Madison when the money train finally stopped. With Derek cutting off all financial support immediately, Madison had to transfer from her expensive private school to the local public high school right in the middle of the semester. No more private tutors, designer clothing allowances, or weekend shopping sprees funded by mommy's credit card schemes. The girl who thought she deserved Emma's shoes because her family had more money suddenly discovered what it's like to be a regular teenager from a broken home with financial problems. She got a part-time job at a local pizza place making minimum wage and had to start buying her own clothes at Target and Walmart instead of Nordstrom and Saks. The same girl who once bragged about Derek's 6-figure salary was now asking customers if they wanted to add breadsticks to their order. Brittany lost everything systematically. The BMW was repossessed since it was leased in Derek's name. The luxury apartment was also in Derek's name, so she got evicted. Most of her designer belongings got sold at auction to pay legal fees and civil damages. She moved back in with her elderly mother in a rundown apartment complex in Tucson and eventually found work at a medical billing call center, making $16.50 per hour, her first real job at age 29. Her Instagram following dropped to about 3,000 followers, mostly bots and desperate guys commenting fire emojis on her increasingly rare posts. No more brand deals, no more lifestyle content, just a washed-up former wannabe influencer posting discount codes for knockoff jewelry companies. But the universe still wasn't finished delivering justice to this entitled woman. 8 months after the divorce was finalized, Derek called me in a complete panic. The IRS had contacted Brittany about $31,000 in unpaid taxes from her supposed influencer income over the past 4 years. Turns out she'd been reporting fake business expenses, hiding cash payments from sponsors, and claiming deductions for personal purchases like designer clothes and spa treatments. The tax fraud investigation revealed even more lies and financial manipulation. They were garnishing her meager wages and threatening to seize any assets they could find. Madison, now 18 and working full-time at a restaurant while attending community college, was actually helping her mother pay rent because the call center salary wasn't enough to cover basic living expenses. The same spoiled girl who once thought Emma should give up shoes she'd worked months to afford was now learning what real financial struggle looks like. She'd gone from entitled princess with unlimited spending money to working-class reality in less than 2 years. But here's the absolute best part of this entire saga that makes me smile every time I think about it. 3 weeks ago, Brittany actually called me out of the blue. She was crying hysterically, begging me to put in a good word with Derek so he might consider helping her with a mounting tax debt that was destroying what remained of her life. She claimed she'd learned her lesson and now understood that she'd made some serious mistakes in the past. She promised she was a completely different person who'd grown and changed through all her hardships. I told her I'd consider reaching out to Derek on her behalf if she would do one simple thing: publicly apologize to Emma on social media and admit that she was completely wrong to assault my daughter over a pair of sneakers. You know what her response was after I made this reasonable request? "I can't do that, Tyler. It would destroy what's left of my reputation and my chances of rebuilding my brand." This woman had lost her marriage, her home, her income, her social media following, her freedom, and her dignity. But she still couldn't bring herself to admit she was wrong for hitting a child over designer footwear. Some people never learn, no matter how badly life teaches them, through natural consequences. Story 3. This story is titled, "My Fiancé Accused Me of Cheating, and Her Dad and Brothers Physically Attacked Me." Now the truth is out and they want reconciliation. Hey everyone, before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. Alright, so this might get a little long, but I need to get it all out. I'm 28, just a regular dude with a stable office job, a decent apartment, and what I thought was a pretty straightforward life. About a year ago, I met the woman I thought I'd spend forever with. Let's call her Emma, 26 female. She was everything I thought I wanted. Smart, funny, and had this way of making me feel like I could take on the world. We dated for a little over a year before I proposed. Nothing fancy, just something private between the two of us. She said yes, and honestly, I thought I'd won in life. A few weeks later, we had an engagement party at her parents' place. It wasn't anything flashy, just family and close friends, and I thought everything was perfect. Looking back, though, I realized there were warning signs. Small things that didn't seem like a big deal at the time. Her mom, for one, had this weird way of talking to me. She'd say stuff like, "Oh, it's so nice you're stable. Emma needs someone she can rely on." Or, "You're such a hard worker. It must be tough not having family connections to lean on." At first, I thought it was just her being awkward, but now I see it for what it was: judgment. Her dad was a little easier to deal with. He seemed chill on the surface, but it was clear he deferred to her mom on pretty much everything. Then there were her brothers. They were younger than her, and had this overprotective big brother energy that didn't quite make sense given their age. It was like they thought I was stealing their precious sister away. But I didn't let any of it bother me. I loved Emma, and I figured the family stuff would work itself out eventually. I mean, once we were married, they'd have to accept me, right? That's just how these things work. Or at least, that's what I told myself. Fast forward about 8 months into our engagement, and things started to get weird. It wasn't anything huge at first, just little things. Emma started acting more guarded, like she didn't trust me as much. She'd ask questions that felt off. Who did you have lunch with today? Or, why didn't you text me back during your break? I chalked it up to wedding stress. People get anxious when planning a big life event, and I thought that's all it was. But then, one random Saturday afternoon, she came into my apartment looking like she'd been rehearsing an argument all day. She had her phone in her hand, and the second she saw me, she said, "We need to talk." Great. The four scariest words in any relationship. Forget "I love you" or "will you marry me." This is the one that sends chills down your spine every time. I don't know about you, but those four words never mean something good. I put my phone down and said, "All right, what's up?" Instead of answering, she shoved her phone in my face. On the screen were these blurry, low-quality photos of me leaving a restaurant with a woman. I blinked at the screen, trying to figure out if I was supposed to recognize myself in the grainy, Bigfoot-level photos. Honestly, I've seen better resolution on memes. "That's Sarah," I said after a second. "She's a coworker. We grabbed lunch last week. What about it?" Emma folded her arms and stared at me like I'd just confessed to murder. "What about it?" she repeated sarcastically. "How about the fact that you didn't tell me about it? Or that you're sneaking around with another woman behind my back?" Her words hit me deep. This was Emma, the woman who used to look at me like I was her whole world, now staring at me like I was some stranger she'd caught in a lie. I couldn't understand how we got here. We'd built our relationship on trust, or at least I thought we had. But now she was acting like everything I'd ever said or done didn't matter. I asked, "Sneaking around? Are you serious right now?" "It was just lunch. We talked about work stuff, that's it." But she wasn't hearing me. "Do you think I'm stupid? I've seen this before. You're just like every other guy who says one thing and does another." At this point, I was starting to get frustrated. How could she believe something like this without even asking me first? It was like all the times I'd been honest, all the ways I'd shown her how much she meant to me, had just vanished from her memory. I said, trying to calm things down, "Emma, I'm telling you the truth. Sarah's a coworker, and we had lunch to discuss the project we're both working on. If you don't believe me, I can show you the emails we exchanged setting it up." Her expression didn't change. If anything, she looked angrier. "Emails? Oh, so now you're covering your tracks with emails? Unbelievable." I felt like I was in a trash movie. No matter what I said, she was stuck in her own version of the story, and I was the villain. "Emma, listen to me," I said, trying to stay calm. "There's nothing going on between me and Sarah. I love you. I wouldn't cheat on you. Why don't you trust me?" She let out this weird, bitter laugh that didn't even sound like her. "Why don't I trust you? Maybe because you've been lying to my face this whole time." "Lying? Are you serious right now?" I shot back. "When have I ever lied to you? You know me better than this. What's going on with you?" She gave me this cold, dead stare. "Do I, though? Because right now, I don't even know who you are." That one stung, not gonna lie. I tried to keep my cool, though. "Come on, Emma. Think for a second. When have I ever given you a reason not to trust me? You see some crappy photos and suddenly I'm a liar? Why wouldn't you just ask me first? You know I'd tell you the truth." She shook her head like I wasn't even worth the effort. "Why should I? I saw the pictures. That's all I need to know." "Seriously? You're gonna hang everything on some blurry-ass pictures? You didn't even stop to ask me what they were about. You're just jumping straight to the worst conclusion, like you've been waiting for an excuse." Her face was so cold, so unrecognizable, that for a moment, I wondered if I'd ever really known her. She wasn't budging. It was like she'd already decided I was guilty the second she walked in the door. Nothing I said was going to change that. And that's when it started to click for me. This wasn't normal. This wasn't her just being mad about some misunderstanding. This was her straight up thinking I was the worst person alive, like she wanted to believe it. I tried to be gentle. "This isn't like you. What's really going on here? Why are you doing this?" Still nothing. Just that same closed-off look. So I took a shot in the dark. "Let me guess. Your mom's behind this, isn't she? She's been feeding you this garbage, and now you're just running with it." Her jaw tightened. She didn't say a word, but she didn't need to. That look told me everything. "Wow," I muttered, laughing bitterly. "So that's how it is. Your mom shows you a couple of crappy pictures, and suddenly I'm the bad guy? You'd rather believe her than me, after everything we've been through?" She didn't even flinch, just stood there, like she was already done with me. That's when I realized I was wasting my breath. It wasn't just about the pictures. She'd already made up her mind. Someone had been in her ear, but whoever it was, they'd poisoned the well. And as bad as it felt in that moment, I didn't know the half of it. Things were about to get a hell of a lot worse. Now, as I was still sitting there trying to process what had just happened, I heard banging on my front door. Not knocking, banging like someone was trying to break it down. Before I even had a chance to ask who it was, the door flew open, and there they were, Emma's dad and her two brothers. They looked furious, and I could tell right away that they weren't here for a peaceful chat. Her dad pointed a finger at me and shouted, "You've been messing with my daughter's heart, you piece of garbage. You think you can just play her like that and get away with it?" For a split second, I thought about running. Not because I was scared, but because I knew there was no reasoning with these people. They weren't here to listen. They were here to punish me for something I didn't even do. And the worst part? Emma was standing right there, watching it happen. I was completely blindsided. "What are you talking about?" I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "This is a huge misunderstanding. I didn't cheat on Emma. Those photos are nothing. They're not what you think." One of her brothers stepped forward, cracking his knuckles like he'd been waiting for this moment. I swear, the way he was cracking his knuckles, you'd think he was about to challenge me to a duel or audition for a mob movie. He said, "Oh, so you're saying Emma's lying now? You're gonna call my sister a liar to my face?" I took a step back, holding up my hands. "No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying someone's feeding her false information. I didn't do anything wrong. If you give me 2 minutes, I can prove it." But they weren't interested in proof. They were already convinced I was guilty. Her dad got in my face. "You're a liar, piece of trash, plain and simple. Men like you don't deserve women like my daughter." And the first punch landed. It came out of nowhere, hitting me square in the jaw. Before I could even react, the second brother grabbed me by the collar and shoved me against the wall. The lamp on my side table crashed to the ground, and I felt a sharp pain shoot through my shoulder. I caught a glimpse of Emma out of the corner of my eye. She was just standing there, arms crossed, like she was watching a bad reality show. No shock, no attempt to stop them. Nothing. How could she let this happen? How could she let them hurt me and say nothing? I tried to defend myself, but it was 3 thugs against 1. They were yelling, throwing accusations and fists at the same time. It felt like they'd been waiting for this opportunity, like they'd been looking for an excuse to take me down. "Admit it!" one of them shouted. "Admit you've been cheating on her." "I didn't!" I shouted back, trying to block another punch. "I swear I didn't cheat." It didn't matter what I said. They weren't there to listen. They were there to punish me. At some point, I ended up on the floor, trying to cover my face as they kicked me. My ribs felt like they were on fire, and my head was spinning. Lying there, I stopped trying to fight back. What was the point? They didn't want the truth. They wanted someone to blame. And as much as I wanted to get up and defend myself, the betrayal of seeing Emma just stand there hurt more than any of the punches they threw. And then, just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. Her dad stood over me, breathing heavily, while one of the brothers pulled him back. "That's enough," he said. "Let's get out of here before we really hurt him." As they walked toward the door, her dad looked back at me. "If I see you near my daughter again, I won't hold back next time. Consider this a warning." Emma was standing in the doorway looking at me. She didn't look upset or worried. She looked cold, detached, like she didn't care that I was lying there, bruised and bleeding. "The engagement off," she said. "You're lucky they didn't break your bones." And just like that, they were gone. I lay there for a while, trying to catch my breath and process what had just happened. My living room was a mess. Furniture overturned, a broken lamp, blood on the carpet. I tried to get up, but my body felt like it had been hit by a truck. Eventually, I managed to crawl to my phone and call a friend to take me to the hospital. The doctor patched me up, some bruised ribs, a split lip, and a mild concussion. He asked me what happened, and when I told him, he just shook his head. "You should report this," he said. "People like that don't stop unless they face consequences." I didn't know what to do. Every part of me was boiling. My fists clenched so hard my nails dug into my palms. I wanted to show up at their house and make them feel even a fraction of what they'd put me through. But I forced myself to stay in control, even though the anger was burning through me like fire. Forgetting about it? Letting it go? No way. I'd been pushed around, falsely accused, and treated like I didn't matter for too long. They weren't getting away with this. Not this time. By the time I left the hospital, I had made up my mind. I wasn't going to let them walk all over me. This wasn't just about the fight. It was about respect, about standing up for myself. The next day, I called a lawyer friend and told him everything. He listened carefully, then said, "You need to file a police report, and you need to do it now. The longer you wait, the harder it'll be to prove what they did to you." So I did. I went to the police station, filed the report, and let them take photos of my injuries. The officers were sympathetic, nodding as I explained what had happened. They assured me they'd investigate, but they also warned me that cases like this could take time. I should have felt some sense of relief, but I didn't. I just felt empty. The woman I thought I was going to spend my life with had not only believed a lie about me, but had let her family assault me over it. I didn't know how things would play out, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to back down. They thought they could scare me into silence, but they were wrong. This was just the beginning. About a week later, I got this random call. The number wasn't saved in my phone. On the other end was her uncle. Let's call him Uncle Joe. I barely knew the guy. I'd met him maybe twice at family events, and both times he seemed like the quiet type who stayed out of drama. So when he said, "We need to talk," I was like, okay? We set up a meeting at this diner off the highway. Real middle of nowhere vibes. When I got there, he was already sitting in a booth. I slid into the seat across from him, and before I could even say hi, he leaned in and whispered, "You deserve to know the truth." Now, when someone says something like that, you know it's about to get wild. I just nodded and let him talk. Turns out this whole mess wasn't some misunderstanding or a heat-of-the-moment thing. Nope, it was a damn setup. Because why settle for regular family drama when you can crank it up to supervillain levels, right? Her mom never liked you, Uncle Joe said, glancing around like someone might be eavesdropping. She's been trying to break you two up for months. She wants Emma to marry this other guy. Family friend, lots of money, big connections. I just stared at him, trying to wrap my head around what he was saying. Wait, so you're telling me her mom, what, framed me? He nodded, looking kind of guilty, like he felt bad for even being related to these people. She hired someone to follow you, take those pictures, and make it look like you were cheating. Then she started spreading rumors, telling Emma you had a double life or some nonsense. You've got to be kidding me, I said, leaning back in the booth. And Emma just bought it? No questions asked? He said that her mom's persuasive, and Emma's always been kinda, let's just say, easy to influence. At this point, I was pissed. Like beyond pissed. It wasn't just that they'd ruined my relationship. They'd trashed my reputation, wrecked my apartment, and left me with actual bruises. Do you have proof of any of this? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Uncle Joe nodded and pulled out a USB drive, sliding it across the table. Texts, emails, all of it. Her mom wasn't exactly subtle about what she was doing. I grabbed the drive and thanked him, though I didn't really know what else to say. My head was spinning. As I drove home, I kept replaying everything in my mind. Her mom had planned this whole thing, like actually planned it, and Emma just went along with it. By the time I got back to my place, I was fuming. I plugged the USB into my laptop and started scrolling through the messages. Sure enough, there it all was in black and white. Her mom texted Uncle Joe's wife about hiring a photographer, telling Emma, "He's not good enough for you," and even coaching her on how to confront me. It was all there. The lies, the manipulation, the betrayal. I forwarded everything to my lawyer and called him up. "Dude, you're not gonna believe this," I said. He listened as I explained, then said, "This changes everything. We're not just looking at assault charges anymore. This is premeditated. We're talking conspiracy." For the first time in days, I felt like I had some control over the situation. I wasn't just going to sit back and let these people ruin my life. The next morning, I handed the evidence over to the police. The detective who took my statement raised an eyebrow as he skimmed through the texts. "This is pretty damning," he said. "We'll be in touch." By now, word had gotten back to Emma's family that I'd filed charges. That's when the call started. Her dad left a voicemail saying we needed to work this out like adults. One of her brothers texted me some half-assed apology about how they might have overreacted. And Emma? She sent this long, rambling text about how she was so confused and didn't know who to believe. Yeah, sure. Now she's confused. Where was all this doubt when her family was rearranging my face? I ignored them all. I wasn't about to let them guilt me into dropping the charges. They wanted to play dirty? Fine. Let's see how they handle it when the law gets involved. But even as I stood my ground, I couldn't shake this nagging feeling of disappointment. Emma had been the one person I thought I could trust. I'd planned to spend my life with her, and now she was just gone. Still, I wasn't about to let that stop me from fighting back. If they thought I was just going to roll over and take this, they had another thing coming. So, after handing over the proof to the cops, I figured things were about to get serious. What I didn't expect was how quickly Emma's family would start freaking out. I mean, these people went from, "We're going to ruin your life," to, "Let's be reasonable," in record time. First, her dad called me. I didn't even recognize the number at first. But when I picked up, there he was, sounding all nervous. "Hey, we might have overreacted," he said, his tone way softer than the last time we'd spoken. "Let's talk this through. No need to involve the police?" I almost laughed. This was the same guy who was ready to knock my teeth out a week ago, and now he wanted to play nice? "Talk to my lawyer," I said, keeping it short and hanging up before he could say anything else. Next came her brother, one of the ones who'd thrown punches. He texted me this long message about how they were just protecting their sister and things got out of hand. He ended it with, "Let's settle this like men." Right, because real men ambush people in their own homes. I didn't even bother replying. And then there was Emma. She sent me a text from a different number. And honestly, just seeing her name pop up on my phone made me nauseous. Her message was all over the place. She said she was so sorry that she'd been manipulated and that her mom had convinced her I was cheating. I didn't know what to think, she wrote. Can we please talk? I miss you. Yeah, no, I wasn't falling for that. Where was this doubt when her family was trashing my place and leaving me with bruises? She had plenty of chances to talk to me, to ask for my side of the story, but she didn't. And now that the truth was out, she wanted to act like none of it happened. I left her on red. Meanwhile, my lawyer was loving the new evidence. This isn't just a solid case, he said. It's a slam dunk. They assaulted you based on fabricated evidence. The texts show clear conspiracy, and your injuries back it all up. They're in deep trouble. Hearing that felt good. But it wasn't like this was going to be an instant win. The cops were investigating, and that was going to take time. Still, knowing the law was on my side made it easier to deal with the constant calls and texts from Emma's family. A couple of days later, the first big development hit. My lawyer called to let me know the police had issued warrants for her dad, her brothers, and her mom. They were being charged with assault and conspiracy, and the cops weren't wasting any time. Apparently, when they showed up to arrest her dad and brothers, the two hotheads tried to argue with the officers. "We were defending our family," one of them yelled. The cops weren't buying it. They'd seen the evidence and knew the difference between defending your family and premeditated assault. The best part? Her mom didn't see it coming. She'd been running around acting like she was untouchable, and then, bam, the police showed up at her door. From what I heard, she immediately tried to play the victim. "I was protecting my daughter. I didn't mean for things to go this far." Yeah, sure. You just accidentally hired someone to frame me and accidentally got your family to assault me in my own home. Totally believable. It was around this time that Emma started getting more desperate. She left me a voicemail, her voice shaky like she'd been crying for hours. "I didn't know," she said. "I swear I didn't know what they were planning. Please, let's talk. I need to explain." But the thing is, there was nothing left to explain. She might not have known her mom set this all up, but she still chose to believe those fake photos over me. She didn't even give me a chance to defend myself before letting her family wreck my life. The way I saw it, if she could turn on me that easily, there was no way I could ever trust her again. So, I deleted the voicemail and blocked her number. By now, her family must have realized how bad things were looking for them, because they tried a new angle: bribery. One of her cousins, who I'd only met once at a Christmas party, showed up at my office parking lot. "Hey man, can we talk?" he said, walking up to me like we were old friends. I stopped and asked, "What do you want?" "They feel awful about what happened," he said, holding his hands up like he was trying to calm me down. "No one wants this to go to court. They're willing to cover your medical bills, maybe throw in a settlement if you'll drop the charges." I just stared at him. "So they think they can pay me off and make this go away?" "Look, I'm just the messenger," he said, shrugging. "No one's saying what they did was okay, but a trial's going to get messy. For everyone." I shook my head. "Tell them I'm not interested. They can explain themselves in court." The cousin looked like he wanted to argue, but I was done. I got in my car and drove off, leaving him standing there. At this point, I wasn't just fighting for justice, I was fighting for myself. These people thought they could mess with my life, ruin my relationship, and get away with it. They were about to learn how wrong they were. During the few days after they tried to bribe me, Emma kept blowing up my phone again through her friends, texts, emails, calls. I didn't listen to most of them, but one caught my eye. She said something about wanting to meet up and set the record straight. At this point, I was done with her, but my lawyer told me I could meet her as long as I wasn't alone. So I agreed, not to listen to her, but to put an end to this. I brought a friend along to witness everything. We met at a cafe near the courthouse. When she walked in, she looked like a mess. Her eyes were red, and she had this look on her face like she'd just lost everything, which honestly, she kinda had. She sat down across from me and immediately started crying. "I'm so sorry," she said, her voice shaking. "I didn't know what they were planning. I thought you cheated. My mom convinced me you were lying to me." I just sat there, letting her talk. She went on about how scared she was of her family, how she felt pressured to believe them, and how she regretted everything. When she finally stopped, I leaned forward and said, "If you loved me, you would have asked for my side. You had a choice, to trust me or to trust them, and you chose them. That's not love." Her tears started flowing harder. "I was confused," she sobbed. "I didn't know what to do." I shook my head. "Confused or not, you let them beat me up in my own home. You stood there enjoying watching it happen. And now you think an apology is enough to fix that? She reached for my hand, but I pulled away. It's too late, I said. They're facing the consequences for what they did, and so are you. This is over. Don't call me again. I stood up, left her sitting there crying, and walked out with my friend. That was the last time I saw her in person. The trial came not long after that. My lawyer prepared me for everything, and when the day arrived, I was ready. I testified about the assault, how they barged into my apartment, ignored my attempts to explain, and beat me until I was bleeding. The prosecutor presented the text messages, the photos of my injuries, and even the USB drive with all the proof of the conspiracy. The uncle came through too. He testified about everything he'd told me, how her mom had planned the whole thing, how she'd manipulated everyone into believing her lies. It was airtight. The defense tried their best, but their arguments were weak. Her dad and brothers claimed they were defending their family's honor, but the jury didn't buy it. Her mom tried to downplay her role, saying she was just worried about her daughter, but the texts painted a different picture. When the verdict came in, guilty, I didn't feel happy. I didn't even feel relieved. I just felt done, like this whole nightmare was finally over. Her dad and brothers got prison time for aggravated assault, and her mom got time for conspiracy. They'd all have criminal records now, and good luck shaking that off. Emma wasn't charged, but her reputation was wrecked. Everyone in her community knew what happened, and she became the girl who believed lies and ruined everything. After the sentencing, she tried to contact me again. I didn't even bother listening to the voicemail. I just blocked her number and deleted the message. The truth is, I'm done with that chapter of my life. It's over. They thought they could break me, but I came out of it stronger. Now, I'm focusing on myself, building a life where no one can take advantage of me again. Justice was served, and I'm moving on. That's all there is to it. And to anyone reading this who's dealing with toxic people or situations, here's my advice. Know your worth. Don't let anyone make you feel small or powerless. Stand your ground, because at the end of the day, you deserve respect, and the only person who can truly fight for you is you. Story 4. My mom tried to cut me from Dad's will at the reading. She wanted it all for her and my sister. The lawyer smirked. Actually, Douglas had other plans. Hey, Reddit. Been thinking about posting this, and here we are. This is the story of how my dad handed my leeching mom and sister a reality check after he passed. Grab popcorn. This one is savage. I'm Silas, 29 male. Growing up, I learned pretty early that some families have normal problems, and some families have Valerie, my mother, the kind of woman who'd return a birthday gift you bought her, and then complain you didn't get her anything. Here's the kind of stuff I'm talking about. I was 12 when I made the honor roll for the first time. Straight A's. Busted my ass all semester. Mom looked at the report card for about 5 seconds and said, well, Kelsey got Student of the Month in her class. Kelsey was 8. Her teacher gave that award to literally every kid at some point. But somehow, that was more impressive. My sister Kelsey was not just the golden child. Mom freaking worshipped her. 4 years younger. And according to Mom, the second coming of Christ in blonde highlights. I was Silas, the family screw-up. Didn't matter that I got better grades, played varsity baseball, had actual friends. In Mom's eyes, I was always one step away from being a disappointment, while Kelsey could have burned the house down, and Mom would have praised her for keeping warm. The kicker? When I was 17, I got a full academic scholarship to ASU's business program. Full ride, everything covered. Mom said, that's nice, honey. 2 weeks later, Kelsey got a participation ribbon at a community theater thing. Mom threw her a party, invited the whole family, made a speech about how proud she was. I wish I was making this up. Dad saw it. Douglas wasn't perfect, but he wasn't blind either. He'd pull me aside after Mom's performances and say stuff like, your mother has her own way of seeing things, which was his way of saying, your mother's insane, but I've been married to her for 20 years and I'm too tired to fight. He spent extra time with me, made sure I knew I wasn't losing my mind. Around the time I turned 16, he started telling me to keep records of things. Emails, texts, conversations. Seemed weird as heck back then. Makes perfect sense now. He died 8 weeks ago. Heart attack at 62. Seemed like it came out of nowhere, but honestly it didn't. Living with Valerie for 35 years would kill anybody. Mom had been writing him for years about the business, about money, about how Kelsey deserved more support for her fashion career. Yeah, my sister's job was working part-time at some overpriced boutique in Scottsdale, calling herself a fashion consultant while Dad paid her rent. The funeral was a performance. Mom played the grieving widow like she was auditioning for something. Kelsey played the devastated daughter, posting black and white photos with crying emojis every 6 hours. Meanwhile, I handled all the actual logistics. Contacted relatives, arranged the service, dealt with the funeral home. The usual scapegoat stuff. At the reception, Mom pulled me aside. Your father would want you to be practical about this, Silas. Kelsey has opportunities right now. Your father's estate needs to support that. What opportunities? I asked. Her part-time retail job? She got that look, the one that said I was being difficult again. She has connections in the fashion industry, boutique management opportunities. This is her career, and it requires investment. Your father understood that. Sure he did. That's why he'd been quietly paying her rent for 3 years, while she built her network by folding clothes. We'll discuss it later at the will reading, Mom said. Translation. I've already decided how this goes, and you're going to shut up and accept it. That was 6 weeks ago, and I'd spent those weeks watching Mom and Kelsey plan their financial victory lap. They'd already started shopping, already started talking about the vacation house in Scottsdale they were going to buy, already started treating Dad's life insurance and estate like their personal ATM. Then the reading day came. Calder and Associates in downtown Phoenix. Mom was dressed like she was attending a charity gala. Black Chanel suit, pearls, the works. Kelsey was right beside her in designer everything, scrolling through her phone and checking her makeup every 30 seconds. Should we get lunch somewhere nice after this? Kelsey asked Mom. Not immediately, Mom said. We want to be respectful. Right. These two had about as much respect as hyenas circling something dead. I was sitting across from them. Mom kept shooting me these looks like my existence was offensive. Kelsey hadn't acknowledged me once. My Uncle Stephen walked in about 10 minutes later. Dad's younger brother. The only family member who'd ever treated decently. He nodded at me, shook hands, and sat down without saying much. Didn't expect to see you here, Stephen, Mom said. Tight smile. The kind that didn't reach her eyes. Douglas was my brother, Stephen said simply. Where else would I be? The receptionist called us back before Mom could respond. We filed into the conference room where Daniel Calder was waiting. Gray hair, expensive suit. He'd been Dad's lawyer for 20 years. Knew the whole family situation. Probably sat through Dad venting about Mom's nonsense more than once. Thank you all for coming, Calder said. I know this is difficult. Douglas was a good man and a valued client. Yes, very sad, Mom said quickly. Now, Daniel, I think we all know why we're here. Douglas and I discussed the estate extensively. Everything should be straightforward. Calder's eyebrow went up. Mrs. Holloway, I think it's best if we proceed with the reading before any assumptions are made. Mom didn't like that, but she smiled and nodded like she was being patient with a slow child. Calder opened the folder. Douglas's will is actually quite simple. It was last updated 8 months ago. 8 months? Kelsey spoke up. But Mom said they'd just finalized everything. We did discuss certain matters, Mom said smoothly. I'm sure it's all in order. The will leaves several specific bequests, Calder continued. To Valerie Holloway, Douglas's wedding ring and the sum of $1. The room went dead silent. Mom's face went through like 5 different emotions in 2 seconds. Excuse me. What? $1, Calder repeated. Along with his wedding ring? That's ridiculous, Kelsey said. There must be a mistake. No mistake. To Kelsey Holloway, Douglas leaves his collection of fishing rods and the sum of $1. Kelsey looked like someone had slapped her. Fishing rods? I don't even fish. That was rather the point, I believe, Calder said dryly. I was trying so hard not to smile. Stephen caught my eye and gave me the tiniest nod. This is invalid, Mom said. The Grieving Widow Act was gone. Douglas wasn't in his right mind. I'll contest this. You're welcome to try, Calder said. However, Douglas had a complete cognitive evaluation 6 months ago. He was perfectly sound. Additionally, he recorded a video statement explaining his decisions. Would you like to see it? Yes, I said. First word I'd spoken since we sat down. Calder pulled out a tablet and set it on the table. Pressed play. Dad's face filled the screen. He was sitting in this same office, looking healthy and lucid. If you're watching this, I'm dead. And Valerie's probably throwing a fit right about now. Mom's face went red. Dad continued on the screen. Let me start by saying I love my son Silas. He's the only one in this family who never asked me for a darn thing except my time. The only one who visited because he wanted to. The only one who gave a crap about me as a person instead of a wallet. Mom stood up. I don't have to listen to this. Sit down, Mrs. Holloway, Calder said. It wasn't a request. She sat. Valerie, Dad's voice continued, you've been trying to bleed me dry for 35 years. Every business decision I made, you questioned. Every dollar I spent on Silas, you resented. You turned Kelsey into a spoiled brat who thinks the world owes her a living. And you tried your hardest to convince me my son was worthless. It didn't work. Kelsey was crying. The ugly kind. Mascara running down her face in black streaks. She had her hands over her face, shoulders shaking. I'm leaving you $1 each because you're both legally entitled to something. But here's what you need to know. Everything else goes to Silas. The house, the business, the investment accounts, all of it. But here's the thing. It already transferred to him 2 years ago through a trust I established. Mom's face went from red to white. That's right. 2 years ago, I moved everything into an irrevocable trust with Silas as the sole beneficiary. You've been living in Silas's house for 2 years, Valerie. Driving his cars, spending his money, every credit card purchase, every check you wrote, every bill you paid, all from accounts Silas owned. That's not possible, Mom whispered. I had my reasons, Dad continued. I needed to see if you'd change. If you'd start treating your son like a human being once you thought the money was secured, and you didn't. You got worse. You tried to cut him out completely, told him he wasn't invited to family dinners, spread rumors about him to relatives, even tried to keep him from my hospital room when I had my health scare last year. That had been fun. Mom telling the nurses I was estranged, and Silas Holloway was not to be admitted. The nurses who'd called me because Dad had me listed as emergency contact and medical power of attorney. So here's how this works, Dad said. Silas owns everything. The house, the cars, the business, the investment portfolio. Valerie, you get $1 and my wedding ring back. Kelsey, you get my fishing rods because maybe learning a skill would do you some good. As for the rest of your lives, that's Silas's call. But if I were him, I'd tell you both to go take a hike. The video ended. The silence in that room was beautiful. Mom found her voice first. This is fraud. He was clearly mentally ill. I'm contesting this. Calder pulled out a stack of documents. Medical records. Psychiatric evaluations. Video recordings of Dad meeting with multiple doctors. Mrs. Holloway, your husband had 4 separate psychiatric evaluations in the 2 years before his death. All of them confirm he was of sound mind. He was quite thorough. The house is in both our names, Mom said desperately. Community property state. He can't just... Actually, the house was placed in the trust before your last refinance, Calder interrupted. You signed the paperwork yourself. Did you read what you were signing? Mom's mouth opened. She'd been too busy spending money to read contracts. Kelsey was still crying, but now it was angry crying. This is nonsense. Silas doesn't deserve anything. He was never there. He never cared about this family. I finally spoke up. Never there? I visited Dad every Sunday for 10 years. You showed up on holidays when you needed money. That's not true. I have texts. Hundreds of them. You asking Dad for rent money, car payments, credit card bailouts? Want me to read them out loud? She shut up. What about the business? Mom demanded. I worked in that office for years. I built that company with Douglas. Stephen laughed. Valerie, you answered phones part-time for 3 years in the 80s. Douglas built that company himself. Who the heck asked you? Mom snapped. Douglas did, Stephen said calmly. He asked me to be here for this. Asked me to make sure Silas had backup when you tried your nonsense. And here we are. Calder cleared his throat. There are a few more things to cover. Mrs. Holloway, you have 60 days to vacate the property at 2847 Desert Ridge Lane. That's Silas's primary residence now. 60 days? Mom was practically screaming. I've lived there for 35 years. You lived there while married to the man who owned it, Calder corrected. That man is dead, and the property belongs to his son. You're being given 60 days out of courtesy. If you contest the trust, that timeline accelerates to 30 days. This is insane, Kelsey said. Silas, come on. You're really going to kick Mom out? Yeah, I said. I really am. We're family. No, we're related. Mom was pacing now. You could see her brain working, looking for leverage. The jewelry. I have jewelry that Douglas bought me. That's mine. Items purchased with marital funds are subject to division, Calder said. However, we have complete documentation of every purchase made in the last 10 years. Any jewelry that can be proven to have been purchased by Douglas or with his funds will need to be returned. Everything was purchased with his funds, Mom shrieked. She looked at me with pure hatred. You planned this. You turned him against us. I didn't have to turn him against anyone. You did that yourselves. I just stood back and watched. You're going to regret this, Mom said. I'll make sure everyone knows what you've done. The family, the church, your father's business associates. They'll know you stole from your own mother. Go ahead, I said. I've got about 3.2 million reasons not to give a crap what people think. Stephen snorted. Valerie, you might want to quit while you're behind. But Mom was on a roll now. That money was supposed to support Kelsey's career. She has real opportunities. Your father promised to support her. He did support her, I said. For years. And what did she do with it? Post pictures of her brunch on Instagram. Real valuable contribution to society. Screw you, Silas, Kelsey spat. Creative. You come up with that yourself, or did you see it in a meme? Okay, that's all, Calder interrupted. Silas, I need you to stay for a few minutes to sign some documents. Valerie, Kelsey, you're free to go. They didn't move. Just sat there in shock. Like their brains couldn't process what had just happened. Ladies, Stephen said, you heard the man. Time to go. Mom stood up. Her hands were shaking. Fine. But this isn't over. They left. Mom first, walking like she'd just aged 20 years. Kelsey following behind, still crying. Her designer bag clutched to her chest like it could protect her. The door closed behind them. Stephen let out a long whistle. Good grief, that was brutal. Your brother was a thorough man, Calder said. That he was, Stephen agreed. That he was. After Mom and Kelsey left, Calder walked me through the actual documentation. The trust papers, the property deeds, the business documents. Everything Dad had transferred into my name over the past 2 years without anyone noticing. Your father was brilliant, Calder said. He structured everything so it wouldn't trigger any red flags. Small transfers, gradual changes. By the time anyone realized what was happening, it was done. How'd he keep Mom from finding out? I asked. Separate accounts, Calder explained. He maintained the joint accounts she had access to, kept them funded at normal levels. But he moved everything else into the trust accounts. She never looked at the full financial picture because she didn't need to. The money was always there when she wanted it. So she was spending my money. For 2 years, yes. Can she contest this? I asked Calder. She can try, he said, but she'll lose. Douglas had everything documented. He even kept a journal detailing her attempts to manipulate him and exclude you from family events. He kept a journal. Calder pulled out a leather-bound book. Thick. He started it years ago, when he began to really see the pattern. Everything's in here. Dates, times, specific incidents. It's admissible in court if she decides to fight. I flipped through it, page after page of documented abuse. We spent another hour going through paperwork, signing documents, transferring titles. By the time we were done, my hand was cramping and my head was spinning with information about investment portfolios, business assets, and property holdings. One more thing, Calder said. He handed me a sealed envelope. Your father wanted you to have this. It's for you to read it alone. I pocketed the letter. Stephen offered to buy me lunch. We went to this Mexican place Dad used to love, sat in a back booth and ordered drinks and tacos while the afternoon heat shimmered outside. Your old man called me about 6 months ago, Stephen said. Told me what he was planning. Asked if I'd have your back when it went down. He knew it'd get ugly. He knew Valerie would go nuclear. Kelsey too. They're predictable. My phone had been buzzing nonstop since we left the lawyer's office. Texts from relatives, from family friends, from people I hadn't talked to in years. Mom had clearly started making calls, spinning her version of events. One text from my Aunt Joyce. Silas, your mother is devastated. How could you do this? I replied, talk to Calder and Associates. They have the full story. Another from my cousin Brad. Dude, what the heck? Your mom's saying you stole everything? Stephen's phone was blowing up too. He ignored it. Just ate his tacos and drank like he didn't have a care in the world. You're gonna get a lot of that, he said. Valerie's going to try to turn everyone against you. Let her, I said. Anyone who believes her without hearing my side isn't worth keeping around anyway. Stephen smiled. Your dad would be proud. We finished lunch. Stephen drove me back to my apartment, the actual apartment I'd been living in, not the small, struggling apartment Mom thought I lived in. It was a nice place. Downtown Phoenix. 2-bedroom, comfortable. You gonna move into the house? Stephen asked. Eventually, I said. Want to let it air out first. Get rid of the Valerie stink. He laughed. Fair enough. You need anything, you call me. Day or night. Your dad asked me to look out for you, and I don't take that stuff lightly. Thanks, Stephen. After he left, I sat on my couch and opened Dad's letter. The private one Calder had given me. Silas, it started. If you're reading this, I'm gone, and hopefully Valerie's losing her mind right about now. I'm sorry I put you through 35 years of her nonsense. I'm sorry I didn't protect you better when you were a kid, but I hope I made up for it by protecting you now. I kept reading. The money's yours, he wrote. Use it well. Don't blow it on stupid stuff. Invest it. Grow it. Build something. But more importantly, use it to be free. Free from anyone who wants to use you. You deserve that freedom. The letter went on for pages. Advice about the business, about investments, About finding someone who actually gave a crap about me instead of my bank account. One last thing, the letter ended. Don't feel guilty. They will try to make you feel guilty. Kelsey. They'll cry. They'll beg. They'll tell you I wasn't in my right mind. Don't believe them. I knew exactly what I was doing, and I'd do it again in a heartbeat. Take care of yourself, kid. Love, Dad. I sat there for a long time, holding the letter, thinking about the man who'd played the long game so I'd be okay. My phone rang. Mom. I sent it to voicemail. It rang again. Kelsey. Voicemail. A text from Kelsey. Silas, please. We need to talk. Too little, too late. Over the next few weeks, they went into full meltdown mode. Mom tried everything. Crying phone calls to relatives. Posting on Facebook about ungrateful children. Showing up at the house and demanding to be let in. I had the locks changed within 48 hours of the will reading. She stood outside screaming about her property rights until the neighbors called the cops. The cop who showed up was this big dude named Officer Salgado. He listened to her rant for about 30 seconds before cutting her off. Ma'am, do you have legal ownership of this property? I lived here for 35 years. That's not what I asked. Do you have your name on the deed? My husband, your deceased husband, who left the property to his son. The son who's asking you to leave. She tried the tears. The whole performance. Salgado wasn't buying it. Ma'am, you need to leave the property or I'll cite you for trespassing. This is my home. According to the documents, Mr. Holloway showed me, this is his home. You have 60 days to collect your belongings per the eviction notice. But right now, you need to leave. She left, but not before screaming at me through the window about what an ungrateful son I was. The neighbors got a heck of a show. Kelsey took a different approach. She went to everyone she knew, called mutual friends, posted long rants, told her coworkers at the boutique, anyone who would listen, got an earful about her cruel brother who stole from his sister, about how her father's will was manipulated and she was getting justice. Her friends were split between supporters who ate up the victim narrative and people who asked why she didn't just get a better job. One friend commented on Facebook, "Girl, if you spend as much time working as you do complaining about your brother, you'd have your own money." Kelsey blocked her. She tried to start a GoFundMe. Help me fight my brother's theft of my inheritance. It raised $300 before GoFundMe shut it down for violating their terms about legal disputes. Kelsey made another Facebook post about being silenced by the corrupt system. The comments on that one were brutal. Someone wrote, "Maybe you're being silenced because you're full of nonsense." Another said, "Your dad literally recorded a video explaining why he cut you out. That's not theft. That's consequences." Kelsey deleted the post and deactivated Facebook for a week, then came back with a new post about taking time for my mental health and how toxic people were attacking her. The self-awareness was non-existent. Mom hired a lawyer, some ambulance chaser who took one look at Calder's documentation and told her she had no case. She fired him and hired another one. Same result. By the third lawyer, she was running out of money for retainers. She showed up at my apartment one night. I saw her through the peephole. Didn't answer. She knocked for 20 minutes before giving up. She left a note taped to my door. "I'm your mother. I raised you. You owe me." I crumpled it up and threw it away. She tried Uncle Stephen, called him crying, begging him to talk sense into me. Stephen told her to take a hike and then called me laughing about it. She tried the whole, "he's turning against family" thing, Stephen said. I reminded her that she'd been bleeding my father dry for decades. She hung up on me. The 60-day eviction notice came and went. Mom didn't move out. She claimed she had nowhere to go. I filed for formal eviction. The sheriff showed up with a notice. Mom threw a tantrum in the driveway that the neighbors recorded and posted to the community Facebook group. The video went viral in the neighborhood. Mom screaming about her rights. The sheriff explaining property law like he was talking to a toddler. Mom calling me every name in the book. The sheriff eventually threatening to arrest her. She was basically the local entertainment for a week. Kelsey moved in with some guy she'd been dating for 3 weeks. Posted about how he was so supportive and understood real love. They broke up 4 days later when he realized she expected him to pay for everything. She moved back to my house, and refused to leave. I had the utilities shut off. No power, no water, no AC in August, in Phoenix. The temperature inside that house must have hit 110 degrees. They lasted 3 days before they finally packed up and left. Mom rented an apartment in a bad part of town. The kind of place she would have called sketchy before she had to live there. Kelsey couch-surfed with various friends until they all got tired of her stuff. The business transition was smooth. Dad had good people running things. They were happy to see me taking over instead of Mom trying to meddle. Sales actually went up the first quarter after Dad died because people weren't dealing with Mom's crazy anymore. One of the longtime employees, Tom, pulled me aside. Your dad was a good man. Glad to see things worked out the way they should have. I sold the house. Couldn't deal with being in a place that had that many lousy memories. Bought a modern place in Scottsdale. Minimalist. Clean. No history. No ghosts. Huge windows overlooking the desert. Finally, some peace and quiet. Mom found out and lost her mind. Posted on Facebook about how I'd stolen her home and sold it to erase her existence. The post got 12 likes, mostly from people who didn't know the full story. Someone commented, "Valerie, you need to stop. You're embarrassing yourself." Mom replied, "You don't know what I've been through." The commenter, "We all know. Douglas's lawyer made sure of that. You treated your son like garbage and now you're paying for it. Take the L and move on." Mom deleted the post. Kelsey got kicked out of her couch surfing situation and had to move in with Mom in the crappy apartment. Two narcissists in 600 square feet would have paid to see that disaster. According to Steven's sources, they were fighting within a week. Kelsey blaming Mom for turning Dad against them. Mom blaming Kelsey for being a burden. Zero self-reflection, zero accountability. Just blaming each other. The text messages continued. Both of them. Begging. Threatening. Guilt-tripping. I blocked them both. They created new numbers. I blocked those too. Finally got a new number entirely, and only gave it to people I trusted. Uncle Steven reported regular updates. Mom had gotten a job at a dentist's office, receptionist work. She lasted 2 weeks before getting fired for being rude to patients. Kelsey was still at the boutique, but had her hours cut because she kept showing up late and complaining to customers about her family situation. Turns out people shopping for $300 jeans don't want to hear about your inheritance drama. One of her coworkers apparently told management, maybe if she focused on actually helping customers instead of trauma dumping on them, she'd make some commission. Kelsey got written up and started looking for other jobs. Found nothing that paid as well as Dad's monthly checks used to. About 4 months after the will reading, I got a call from Calder. Mom was trying one last challenge. She'd found some lawyer willing to take her case on contingency. Claims about undue influence. About Dad not being in his right mind despite all the evidence. About me manipulating a sick old man, Cald said. They're trying to tie things up in court, make it expensive for you, hoping you'll settle just to make it go away. How much would a settlement cost them to even propose? They're asking for $500,000. I laughed. Tell them to get lost. That's not quite the legal terminology I'll use, but I'll convey the sentiment. I paused. Actually, I have a better idea, I said. Can you arrange a mediation? Face to face. Let them think I'm considering it. The mediation was set up at a neutral office downtown. Me, Calder, Steven, Mom, Kelsey, and their bargain bin lawyer, who looked like he'd gotten his degree online. Mom and Kelsey showed up looking rough. Mom had aged like 10 years and 4 months. Kelsey looked like she'd been eating nothing but rage. Their lawyer had a cheap suit written all over him, and desperation in his eyes. I could tell he already regretted this case. We sat down across from each other. The mediator started with her spiel about good faith negotiation, about finding common ground and family healing. I interrupted her. How much do you owe this guy? I asked Mom, pointing at her lawyer. That's not relevant, the lawyer said quickly. How much? I repeated. Mom looked away. He's working on contingency. Right. 30% of whatever he gets. So he's motivated to squeeze me. Got it. I turned to the mediator. Here's my offer. $0. Not now, not ever. They can spend the next 10 years in court if they want. Silas, please, Kelsey said. This is killing Mom. Really? I said. Because last I checked, Mom was alive and complaining on Facebook. Dad's the one who's dead. That's not fair, Mom said. I loved your father. You loved his money. There's a difference. The lawyer tried to jump in. Mr. Holloway, my clients are willing to compromise. We understand emotions are high, but nothing, I said. You took this case because you thought I'd roll over. Pay some nuisance settlement to make you go away. Here's what's actually going to happen. You're going to withdraw your claim. Today. Or I'm going to file a countersuit for attempted fraud, harassment, and abuse of process. Then I'm going to bury you in discovery. Depose every person they've ever known. Expose every lie they've told. Make this so expensive and humiliating that you'll regret ever taking this case. The lawyer went pale. Calder slid a folder across the table. I've already started drafting the countersuit. It names you personally for filing a frivolous claim. You'll be defending your law license, not just this case. The lawyer opened the folder, started reading. That's unnecessarily aggressive, he said weakly. Your clients unnecessarily sued me despite having zero legal standing. So yeah, I'm going to be aggressive. Son, Mom said. Her voice was smaller now. Different. I raised you. I gave you a home. Don't I deserve something for that? You deserve what Dad gave you. The fact that you're here asking for more proves he was right about you. We're broke, Kelsey tried. We need help. Get on food stamps, I said. Get government assistance. Get a second job. Do what millions of Americans do every day. Figure it out. You're really going to let your own mother live in poverty? Kelsey asked. I'm going to let her live with the consequences of her choices, I said. She had 35 years to be a decent person. She chose not to be. That's on her. Mom started crying. The ugly kind. Real tears this time, not performance tears. I'm sorry, okay? I'm sorry for everything. For how I treated you. For Kelsey. For all of it. Please. I'm begging you. I looked at her. Really looked at her. This woman who'd made my childhood a living heck. Who'd messed with my head for years. Who'd turned my sister into a clone of herself. Who'd tried to cut me out of my own father's will. You're not sorry you did it, I said. You're sorry it didn't work. There's a difference. The mediator tried to salvage things. Perhaps if we took a break, we're done here, I said, standing up. Calder, Stephen, let's go. As we headed for the door, Mom's voice cracked. Your father would be ashamed of you. I turned back. One last time. Dad planned this entire thing. If he were here right now, he'd be laughing at you. And honestly, so am I. We left them there. The lawyer was already gathering his papers, clearly done with the case. Mom was sobbing. Kelsey was staring at the floor, probably trying to figure out which friend's couch she could crash on next. In the parking lot, Stephen clapped me on the shoulder. Ice cold, kid. I'm impressed. Think they'll drop it? I asked Calder. After that? They'd better. Their lawyer knows he's screwed if he continues. No judge is going to side with them after we present Douglas's documentation. They actually dropped it 2 days later. The lawyer pulled out, probably realizing he wasn't getting paid and definitely wasn't winning. Mom and Kelsey disappeared from my life after that. No more calls, no more texts, no more Facebook drama, just silence. Beautiful silence. 6 months after Dad died, I finally felt like I could actually breathe. The business was doing great. Revenue was up 18%. Employee morale was the best it had been in years. I'd made some smart investments with the money. Diversified portfolio. Real estate. Some startup ventures that looked promising. The $3.2 million was now closer to $3.5 million. Dad would have been proud. The new house felt like home. No bad memories, no ghosts, just space and light and peace. Uncle Stephen came over for dinner once a week. We'd sit on the back patio, have drinks, watch the sunset turn the desert all gold and purple. Talk about Dad without Mom and Kelsey's nonsense hanging over everything. Got an update on your mom, Stephen said one evening. She's working at a call center now. Night shift. Kelsey's working retail at a different mall. Good, I said. They're figuring it out. Kelsey's not on Facebook anymore. Deleted her whole account after people kept calling her out. Even better, we clinked glasses. The sunset was nuts that night. All orange and red and purple like the sky was burning. I also started dating someone. Leah. She taught at an elementary school in Tempe. We met at a coffee shop. She had no clue about the money at first. Just thought I was some regular guy who ran a manufacturing business. When I finally told her, weeks into dating, she laughed and said, that explains the weird paranoia about gold diggers. But she stayed. Didn't change how she acted. Didn't suddenly start wanting expensive stuff or fancy dinners. Just wanted to hang out with me. Talk about her day. Watch movies on the couch. Normal stuff. Real stuff. I started a foundation in Dad's name, the Douglas Holloway Business Scholarship, for kids who wanted to learn business but didn't come from money. Kids who reminded me of Dad when he was young. Kids who deserved a shot without some narcissist parent sabotaging them. The first year, we funded 12 scholarships, full rides to Arizona State's business school, books, housing, everything. One of the kids sent me a handwritten thank you note, said he was the first in his family to go to college, that his mom cleaned houses and his dad worked construction, and neither of them ever thought their son would go to college. That note's framed in my office, next to the picture of Dad and me at my college graduation. I heard through the grapevine that Mom and Kelsey moved to California, chasing some new thing, some new person to con probably. Didn't care enough to find out more. Uncle Stephen told me Mom tried hitting up other family members for money. Got shut down by everybody. Nobody wanted anything to do with her. She's burned every bridge, Stephen said. There's no one left to con. Good, I said. One Sunday morning, I drove out to the cemetery where Dad was buried. Hadn't been since the funeral. Too much chaos. But now things were quiet. I could visit without feeling like I was in the middle of World War III. I sat by his headstone. "You were right," I said to the stone. "You saved my butt, old man." Saved my sanity. Probably saved my life. The wind picked up, rustled through the trees. I told him about the business, about Leah, about everything. More wind, more rustling. I stayed for a while longer. Didn't cry. Didn't need to. Just feeling lighter than I had in forever. This was what he wanted. I raised my bottle to the sunset. "Thanks, Dad. I owe you one." And I swear I could feel him smiling. YouTube just dropped this new hype feature. If you're hooked on this story, smash that hype button. It tells YouTube this video deserves to blow up, and it keeps even crazier stories coming your way. Story 5. My mother called me a disappointment and excluded me from family gatherings. She regretted it when my aunt revealed I graduated from Harvard Law. Hey, Reddit. So my mother decided I was the family failure when I dropped out of nursing school at 19, and she spent the next 9 years telling everyone I'd probably ended up homeless or in jail. Plot twist. I graduated from Harvard Law and became a federal prosecutor. She found out at Thanksgiving dinner when my aunt laid out my credentials on the table like a hand of cards. What happened next turned into a legal nightmare that required restraining orders and courtroom testimony. Buckle up. I'm Sarah, 28 years old, and I need you to understand something about my mother before we get into the chaos. She didn't just disapprove of my choices, she actively erased me from the family narrative. When I dropped out of nursing school, she used the word failure to my face. Not disappointed, not concerned. Failure. She told me I'd wasted her genetics, her time, and her money, raising someone who couldn't even finish a basic degree. Here's the thing about toxic parents. They don't just cut you off quietly, they make a production of it. My mother called aunts, uncles, cousins, and explained that I was too embarrassing to have at family gatherings anymore. Said seeing me would just remind everyone of wasted potential. She literally uninvited me from Christmas that year via text message. "Don't come. Your presence would ruin the mood for people who actually achieved something." I was living in my car at the time, working double shifts at a warehouse distribution center, making $11.50 an hour, trying to figure out my next move. The warehouse job was brutal. 10-hour shifts lifting boxes in a facility where summer temperatures hit 95 degrees inside, and winter meant frozen loading docks at 5 a.m. My hands were constantly cut up from cardboard edges and packing tape. I'd park my beat-up 2003 Honda Civic behind a 24-hour gym, pay $30 monthly for a membership just to shower, and sleep in the back seat with everything I owned stuffed into 2 duffel bags. My mother didn't know any of this, didn't care to ask, never once checked if I was okay or safe or alive. My Aunt Rachel found me crying in a grocery store parking lot that Christmas Eve. I'd gone in to buy a $6 rotisserie chicken, my planned Christmas dinner, and completely broke down in the checkout line when the cashier wished me happy holidays. Rachel was behind me in line, saw me falling apart, and without hesitation took me home. She fed me actual food, let me sleep in her guest room with clean sheets and a real mattress, and never told my mother where I was. Rachel became the family I needed when mine disappeared. She helped me apply to community college, looking over my application essays at her kitchen table until 2 a.m. Co-signed my apartment lease when I had 0 credit history, and my mother's voice in my head saying I'd never amount to anything. Showed up when I had absolutely no one else. I started taking paralegal courses during the day at community college. Criminal Justice 101, Legal Research Methods, Court Procedures and Documentation. Worked at a small law firm at night, filing papers and organizing case files for $14 an hour. The firm was 3 attorneys in a converted house downtown, handling everything from traffic tickets to small business contracts. Nothing glamorous, but I was finally around people who used their brains for something other than tearing others down. The senior partner, this older guy named William, started noticing I understood the cases better than some of the first-year associates they'd bring in. I'd catch legal issues in documents, point out precedents they'd missed, ask questions that made him pause and reconsider his approach. 6 months in, he pulled me aside after I'd spotted a major problem in a contract that would have cost his client $40,000. "You're wasting your potential filing papers," he said. "Have you ever thought about law school?" The idea seemed impossible. Me? Law school? I was the family failure who dropped out of nursing school and lived in her car. But William offered to write me a recommendation letter if I applied, and something shifted in my brain. Maybe I wasn't the story my mother told everyone. I took the LSAT 4 times before getting a score high enough for decent schools. First attempt, 151. Second, 157. Third, 163. Fourth attempt, after 6 months of studying every morning before my warehouse shift and every evening after the law firm, 171. High enough to be competitive at top-tier schools. My aunt drove me to every single test. 3-hour drives to the testing center because our town didn't have one. She'd wait in the parking lot with coffee and encouraging texts, then drive me home while I either celebrated or cried depending on how it went. I applied to 14 law schools with fee waivers, got rejections from 8, waitlisted at 3, accepted at 2. And then the email that changed everything. Harvard Law School, with a need-based financial aid package that would cover most of tuition. I sat in Rachel's kitchen staring at my laptop screen, reading the acceptance email over and over, convinced it was spam or a mistake. Rachel looked over my shoulder, screamed, and started crying harder than I've ever seen anyone cry. We celebrated with $8 takeout Chinese food and stayed up until 4 a.m. looking at photos of Harvard's campus online. Meanwhile, my mother was telling everyone I was probably homeless or in jail. I know this because relatives would occasionally mention it to Rachel. Such a shame about Sarah. And, your sister must be heartbroken about how that turned out. My mother had created an entire narrative about my failure, used me as a cautionary tale at family dinners about what happens when children don't listen to their parents. My brother Danny managed a cell phone store. Nothing wrong with that. Honest work, decent money. He seemed happy enough. But my mother treated him like he'd cured disease, posted constantly on social media about successful mothers raising successful children, always featuring Danny and conspicuously ignoring that she had 2 kids. She'd comment on family photos about being blessed with 1 good child, implying she only had 1 child total. Relatives stopped asking about me entirely. If someone mentioned my name at family gatherings, she'd say, "We don't discuss that like I died or committed murder." I became the family ghost, the cautionary tale, the daughter who didn't exist except as a warning. 3 years of law school without a single word to my mother. I studied contracts and constitutional law while she told people I'd probably ended up on the streets. Took finals while she posted about family values. Graduated magna cum laude with a 3.8 GPA and received a job offer from a federal judge for a prestigious clerkship that paid $68,000 a year. More money than I'd ever imagined making. Aunt Rachel sat front row at graduation in a hat she'd bought specifically for the occasion, crying so hard she couldn't see her phone screen to take photos. She'd flown to Cambridge on a budget airline, stayed in a hostel to save money, and refused to miss seeing me walk across that stage. After the ceremony, we went to this little Italian restaurant near campus, and she toasted me with house wine. To the girl who proved everyone wrong. That same week, my mother was posting on social media about successful mothers raising successful children, meaning my brother, who'd just gotten promoted to district manager. She'd write captions about being blessed with a child who makes me proud, and relatives would comment congratulations without realizing the insult embedded in the singular child. I passed the bar exam on my first attempt. Started working for the Justice Department's Criminal Division in Washington, D.C., prosecuting federal fraud cases. My starting salary was $72,000, with government benefits and a pension plan. I rented a 1-bedroom apartment in a decent neighborhood, furnished it slowly with stuff from IKEA and estate sales, and built a life where nobody expected me to fail. I argued my first federal case at 28, standing in a courtroom defending the government's position on securities fraud. Won the motion, earned respect from colleagues who had no idea about the family drama or the car I'd lived in or the warehouse job that destroyed my hands. My aunt kept a scrapbook of every achievement, newspaper clippings when my cases made the news, copies of my law review article, photos from court appearances she'd drive down to attend. She documented the life my mother refused to acknowledge existed. Last Thursday was Thanksgiving at my grandmother's house in our hometown. I hadn't been to a family gathering in 9 years. The last one had been that Christmas I got uninvited from, and I'd made peace with never attending another. But Aunt Rachel called me 3 weeks before Thanksgiving, with this tone in her voice I couldn't quite read. "I want to handle something special," she said. "Do you trust me?" I trusted her completely. She'd earned that 1,000 times over. So I said yes without knowing the plan. The whole family gathered. 37 people crammed into my grandmother's house. Aunts, uncles, cousins I barely remembered, second cousins, family friends who might as well be blood. My mother was holding court in the living room when I arrived, mid-story about my brother's promotion to district manager of 3 stores. She had this way of telling stories that made everything sound more impressive than it was, like Danny had founded Apple instead of managing retail locations. I raised him with values and direction, she was saying to an audience of relatives who nodded along. That's what makes the difference between children who succeed and... Aunt Rachel stood up before my mother could finish the thought. I have an announcement, she said loudly enough that conversations died mid-sentence. My mother looked annoyed at being interrupted, that flash of irritation she got when someone disrupted her performances. Rachel pulled out a folder from her bag, thick, official-looking, the kind lawyers carry into court. She started pulling out documents one by one, laying them on the dining table like she was dealing cards. My law degree from Harvard, the official one with the Latin and the seals and the signatures. My bar certification from the D.C. Bar Association. Letters of recommendation from 2 federal judges, one from my clerkship supervisor and one from a judge I'd worked with on an appeal. An article about my latest case from the Washington Post, a fraud prosecution that resulted in a 15-year sentence and $8 million in restitution. She laid them out methodically while everyone went completely silent. You could hear the clock ticking in the kitchen. Someone's phone buzzed and they silenced it immediately. Since some people seem unaware, Rachel said, looking directly at my mother with this expression I'd never seen before. Pure steel. Your daughter graduated from Harvard Law School 3 years ago. She's a federal prosecutor with the Department of Justice. She argues cases in federal court and has a 94% conviction rate on fraud charges. My mother's face went through about 17 different expressions in 10 seconds. Shock, disbelief, confusion, anger, more confusion. She grabbed the diploma off the table, checking the embossed seal and the signatures like it might be fake. Her hands were shaking. This can't... How? She stammered, unable to form complete sentences. My Uncle Jeff asked the obvious question. How long have you been a lawyer? Rachel answered for me, her voice carrying across the silent room. 4 years. 4 years of your niece being a federal prosecutor in Washington, D.C. And her mother had no idea because she banned Sarah from family events and told everyone not to mention her name. My grandmother, sitting in her usual chair by the window, asked the question that cut deepest. How could you not know your own daughter was at Harvard? My mother tried to say I'd hidden it from her, that I deliberately kept her in the dark, that this was somehow my fault for not reaching out. The excuses fell flat in a room full of people staring at the evidence on the table. Rachel wasn't done. She pulled out her phone and started showing text messages from years ago. Screenshots of conversations where my mother had said I was worthless and would probably end up in prison. Messages where she'd specifically told relatives not to help me because I needed to learn consequences the hard way. Email chains where family members had asked about me and my mother responded that some children are born wrong and can't be fixed. The room erupted into chaos. Relatives demanding explanations. My grandmother crying about missed years, about a granddaughter she'd been told to not contact. My brother Danny admitting he'd known where I was, but had been told not to say anything, which earned him furious looks from about 6 different people. My mother tried to hug me then, switching tactics like she'd been coached. We can start fresh, she said, reaching for me with tears streaming down her face. This is wonderful news. We can put the past behind us and... I stepped back, keeping distance between us. You were right about one thing, I said, my voice steady, despite my heart trying to break out of my chest. I was a disappointment. I disappointed you by succeeding without your permission. I left before anyone could argue or guilt-trip me into staying. Rachel drove me to Thanksgiving that day, and she drove me home. We didn't talk much during the hour-long drive back to my apartment. Just sat in comfortable silence while I processed what had happened. But my mother found my address somehow, learned later that Danny gave it to her, and showed up at my doorstep the next evening. I opened the door to find her standing there in the hallway outside my apartment, dressed up like she was heading to church, holding her purse with both hands. We need to discuss your monthly fund, she said. No hello, no, how are you? Just immediate demands. I stood in my doorway, gripping the frame to keep steady, trying to process what I'd just heard. I'm not discussing anything tonight, I managed to say, voice surprisingly calm despite the shock hitting me like cold water. She started to push past me into the apartment, like she had every right to enter. I stepped into the doorway, blocking her, repeating that she needed to leave. My hands were shaking, but I kept my voice level. This conversation is over. You need to go. My mother's face shifted through confusion, then anger, then this calculated sweetness she used when manipulation became necessary. We're both adults, she said with forced pleasantness. We can talk about this reasonably. I just need a few minutes to explain my situation. We're done for tonight. If you want to talk, it needs to be another time with proper notice. Leave now. She switched back to anger, the mask slipping. You're being dramatic and childish. After everything at Thanksgiving, you owe me the chance to speak. The entitlement in her voice, like I owed her anything after 9 years. You need to leave. Now. My voice got firmer, more final. She stepped back but said she'd wait in her car until I was ready to be reasonable. I closed the door and locked it immediately, every deadbolt and chain. Through the peephole, I watched her stand in the hallway for 5 solid minutes before finally turning toward the elevator. The second she was gone, I called Rachel with shaking hands, barely able to hold the phone steady. She answered on the first ring like she'd been waiting. She knows where I live, I said. And then I was breaking down completely, all the composure from earlier just evaporating. Stay put. Check all your locks. I'll be there in 20 minutes. I did a full check of every window latch and door lock, then sat on my couch trying to slow my breathing. My phone buzzed. A text from Danny. My stomach dropped before I even read it. Mom really needs help. Just hear her out. So he'd given her my address. The betrayal hit different, because I thought he at least stayed neutral in all this. Another text came through. You're making this harder than it needs to be. Family helps family. I didn't respond. Just screenshot both messages and added them to a folder I was starting to keep. Rachel arrived exactly 20 minutes later with an overnight bag. I unlocked the door after checking the peephole 3 times. She came inside and immediately started making tea while I paced my apartment, words spilling out about the doorstep demand and Danny's betrayal, and how my mother had tracked me down. Rachel listened while the kettle heated, then calmly said, "We need a plan for the morning, but tonight is just about feeling safe and getting sleep." She sat up on my couch with blankets and pillows. I tried to sleep but lay awake most of the night, replaying Thanksgiving dinner, imagining my mother showing up at my office building, or causing a scene at the courthouse, or calling my boss. Every small sound in the building made me jump. Footsteps in the hallway, doors closing, the elevator dinging. Around 4 a.m., I finally drifted off from pure exhaustion. Woke up a few hours later to 3 missed calls from my mother and another text from Danny. She just wants what's fair. You owe her for raising you. My hands shook as I showed Rachel. She read the messages with a tight expression, then suggested I send one clear text to my mother setting a boundary, then block her number and switch to email-only contact. I spent 30 minutes drafting and redrafting the message, I will not be providing any money. If you need to contact me, use email only. Do not come to my home or workplace again. My finger hovered over the send button for a full minute before I pressed it. Then I blocked my mother's number while Rachel watched. Over the next hour, my mother tried calling from 3 other numbers. I blocked each one as they came in. I got ready for work on autopilot, putting on my suit, grabbing my briefcase, trying to act like this was a normal Monday. Rachel offered to drive me to the office, but I told her I needed to try doing normal things, that I couldn't let this derail my whole life. My mother left 4 voicemails on my work phone before I even arrived at the Justice Department building, each one cycling between saying she was my mother and deserved respect, to listing everything she'd given up for me, to warning I'd regret treating family this way. I saved them all as records, my stomach turning as I listened to her voice shift from sweet to threatening. My colleague Sydney noticed me looking shaken at my desk and asked if everything was okay. I gave a vague answer about family stress, not ready to explain the whole situation. Sydney brought me coffee without asking again, which helped more than she probably knew. My supervisor, Gwendolyn, called me into her office mid-morning, and my heart dropped, thinking somehow my mother had already contacted the department. Instead, Gwendolyn gently said she'd noticed I seemed distracted, and asked if there was anything affecting my work I needed to discuss. I made a split-second decision to be honest. Told her I was dealing with a family member who'd become pushy, that I was handling it, but wanted her aware in case there were any attempted contacts to the office. Gwendolyn took it seriously immediately, asked if I felt safe, whether I needed help with building security or documentation. I explained the situation briefly, kept it professional and factual, and she said she'd loop in the right people to make sure I was protected at work. She picked up her phone and called HR while I was still sitting there, putting it on speaker, explained to someone named Rita that this was a potential security concern involving family harassment of a federal employee. Rita asked if I was comfortable coming down to her office right now to file a formal report. We walked down 2 floors together. Rita had me fill out an incident report form documenting every contact my mother had made since showing up at my apartment. Asked specific questions about whether I felt physically safe, whether my mother had made threats, whether I needed workplace accommodations. She printed out a copy for me and one for building security, then walked me down to the security office herself. The head of security listened carefully as Rita explained, and I provided my mother's full name and description. He pulled up the visitor log system and added a note that she wasn't authorized for building access under any circumstances, flagging it as a security alert. He gave me his direct cell number and told me to call immediately if she showed up anywhere near the building. Walking back to my desk, I felt protected in a way I hadn't since this started, like there were actual systems in place instead of just me trying to handle it alone. That evening, I was heating up leftovers when my phone buzzed with a message from my cousin Jennifer, someone I hadn't talked to in probably 5 years. She sent me a screenshot of a Facebook post my mother had made an hour ago. Something vague about how some children forget where they came from and turn their backs on the people who sacrificed everything for them. The post already had 23 comments, mostly from relatives I barely remembered, and my mother's friends, all saying supportive things about what a good mother she was and how ungrateful kids were these days. My hands shook reading through the comments, seeing my mother play victim to an audience who had no idea what actually happened. I screenshot the post and all the comments before she could delete them, saving everything to a folder Rachel had told me to start keeping. The folder already had the voicemails, the texts from Danny, and photos of my mother at my apartment door that the building concierge had helped me get from security footage. Each piece of evidence felt like protection, but also like proof that this was really happening, that my mother was escalating instead of backing off. My grandmother called around 9 p.m. that night, her voice tired and sad in a way that made my chest hurt. She asked if we could all just sit down and talk things through like family, maybe have dinner at her house where everyone could say their piece calmly. I loved my grandmother and knew she meant well, but I told her gently that talking hadn't worked for 9 years when I was the one being shut out. Explained that I needed space right now to figure things out and protect myself, that I wasn't trying to hurt anyone, but couldn't let my mother harass me just because we were related. My grandmother was quiet for a long moment, then said she understood, though her voice sounded hurt. Asked me to at least keep her updated so she didn't worry. I promised I would, because I didn't want her caught in the middle. The next day, Rachel showed up at my apartment after work with her laptop and a determined expression. She sat up at my kitchen table and started showing me things I'd never seen before. Screenshots of text messages between her and my mother from years ago, back when I first got cut off. Email chains where my mother told relatives I was worthless and would probably end up in prison. Messages where she specifically instructed people not to help me, because I needed to learn consequences the hard way. Rachel had been saving all of it for years, creating a digital record of every cruel thing my mother said about me when she thought I'd never see it. Reading the messages hit harder than expected because seeing the words in writing made them more real somehow. My mother had called me a waste of space in an email to my uncle. Told Rachel I was going to end up homeless and it would serve me right. Said in a group text that some children are just born wrong and can't be fixed. Rachel watched me read through everything with a sad but steady expression. When I finally looked up, she said this was why she'd been documenting, because she knew one day I might need proof that I wasn't overreacting or being dramatic. The cruelty documented in black and white validated every boundary I was trying to set now. My phone rang from a number I didn't recognize the next afternoon while I was reviewing case files. I answered thinking it might be work-related, and Danny's voice came through immediately. He launched into this explanation about how my mother was in a financial crisis, behind on her mortgage by 3 months, and she thought I'd want to help now that I was successful and making good money. The way he framed it made anger flash through me, like my mother's money problems were somehow my responsibility to solve. I cut him off. I'm not discussing money with you or Mom. This conversation is over. Before I hung up, I asked him directly why he'd given her my address when he knew I kept it private. The question made him go quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter. Mom threatened to kick me out of her house if I didn't help her contact you. The words shifted something in my understanding. Danny was still living under her roof at 32, still financially dependent, still subject to her control. He explained he'd been trying to save money to move out, but it was hard on his salary, and my mother used that as leverage. I felt a complicated mix of anger at him for giving up my address and sympathy for realizing he was trapped in his own way. I can't fix your situation, I told him. You need to make your own choices about what you're willing to tolerate. But I won't be your enemy if you can start respecting my boundaries. He apologized, and I believed he meant it, even though I wasn't ready to fully trust him yet. That evening, Rachel came over, and we spent 3 hours at my kitchen table researching legal options. Looked up information about cease and desist letters, restraining orders, harassment documentation requirements. Rachel took notes while I bookmarked relevant legal sites. We talked through pros and cons of each option. I was hesitant to involve lawyers because it felt like such a huge escalation, But Rachel pointed out my mother had already escalated by showing up at my home and demanding money. We decided I should consult with a private attorney rather than using anyone connected to my work. Rachel mentioned she knew a family law attorney named Phyllis, who specifically handled estrangement cases. She offered to make an introduction, and I agreed. The next morning, getting ready for work, an email notification popped up from my mother's address. Subject line, invoice for services rendered. My stomach dropped before I even opened it. I sat on my bed and clicked the email. Found a detailed breakdown that made my hands start shaking. She'd listed estimated costs for raising me from birth to 18, line items for food, housing, education, clothing, medical care, even something labeled emotional labor and guidance. The total came to $247,850. At the bottom, she'd written, a monthly payment plan of $2,000 would be fair compensation for my investment in raising you. As a successful federal prosecutor, earning $72,000 annually, you can easily afford this. First payment due by end of month. She included payment instructions, her bank account routing number and account number, like this was an actual business transaction. I read through the invoice 3 times, trying to process that my mother had actually made a spreadsheet billing me for my childhood, treating my existence like a loan that needed repayment with interest. I forwarded the email to Rachel and Phyllis without adding any comment because I was too stunned to formulate a response. Rachel called within minutes, her voice tight with anger, asking if I was okay. Phyllis replied within an hour with a professional message. This type of manipulation is more common than you'd think in estrangement cases, and it's actually helpful documentation of harassment for any legal proceedings. Parents attempting to bill adult children for childhood expenses have zero legal standing, and this shows a clear pattern of financial coercion. She offered to meet today or tomorrow to discuss options for establishing legal boundaries. I responded saying, tomorrow afternoon worked because I needed a day to process. I spent the rest of the morning at work trying to focus on my cases, but my mind kept drifting back to that invoice. To my mother calculating the cost of every meal she'd ever fed me, every piece of clothing she'd bought, every roof over my head. Like those weren't basic parental obligations, but business expenses requiring return on investment. That weekend, Rachel suggested we visit my grandmother together. I agreed because I didn't want my grandmother caught in the middle or fed lies about what was happening. We drove to her house Saturday afternoon and found her looking older than at Thanksgiving, more tired and worn down by the family drama. She hugged me tight before we even sat down, holding on longer than usual. Over tea at her kitchen table, she started telling me stories about my mother's childhood I'd never heard before, how my mother was always concerned with appearances and what neighbors thought, how she'd get upset if my grandmother wore the wrong clothes to school events, or if their house wasn't perfect when guests came over. My grandmother described how my mother had cut off her own sister, my grandmother's daughter, years ago over some perceived slight at a family wedding, and they didn't speak for 5 years. Told me about how my mother kept score of every kindness and expected repayment with interest, bringing up favors years later and demanding equivalent returns. The stories gave me context I'd never had before, painting a picture of generational patterns that helped me understand my mother's behavior without excusing it. My grandmother held my hand across the table and said she was sorry she hadn't seen these patterns clearly enough to protect me from them. None of this is your fault, I told her, squeezing her hand. She kept talking, describing my mother as a teenager refusing to wear hand-me-downs, even when money was tight, how she'd rather skip meals than be seen in clothes that weren't new. The pattern clicked into place. That invoice wasn't some desperate one-time thing, but completely consistent with how my mother viewed every relationship as a transaction. Headlights swept across the kitchen window. My grandmother glanced out, then back to me with a worried expression. Danny's car pulled into the driveway, and I felt my whole body tense. He walked in looking like he hadn't slept in days. Dark circles under bloodshot eyes. Shoulders slumped. He nodded at Rachel and my grandmother, then looked at me and asked if we could talk privately. I didn't want to, but Rachel gave me a small nod, so I followed him out the back door into my grandmother's small yard. The motion sensor light clicked on, and we stood there in the November cold, our breath making clouds in the air. He started talking before I could say anything, words tumbling out about how he'd been my mother's go-between with relatives for years. Delivering her version of events, actively discouraging people from reaching out to me. He admitted he'd tell aunts and uncles I was doing fine when they asked, that I preferred being left alone, all while knowing my mother was calling me a failure. His voice cracked when he said he was tired of it, that he didn't know how to extract himself when he was living in her house and financially dependent on her letting him stay there. I can't fix your situation, I told him, crossing my arms against the cold. I won't be your enemy, but you need to make your own choices about what you're willing to tolerate. He nodded, looking at the ground, then admitted my mother's debts were worse than he'd told me, that she'd been borrowing money from relatives for years and was actually facing foreclosure on the house. I felt a small flicker of something that might be sympathy, but I reminded myself that financial crisis didn't justify 9 years of cruelty or showing up at my door demanding monthly payments. Monday morning, I sat in Phyllis's office, a small space with legal books lining the walls and case files stacked on every surface. I laid out the entire situation, being cut off at 19, 9 years of silence, the Thanksgiving revelation, my mother showing up at my door, the invoice email, all of it. Phyllis took notes on a yellow legal pad, occasionally asking clarifying questions about dates and specific incidents. When I finished, she explained my options, starting with a formal cease and desist letter establishing clear boundaries and consequences, escalating to filing for a restraining order if harassment continued. We decided to start with the letter, strongly worded but giving my mother one clear chance to back off before involving court. Phyllis said she'd have a draft ready by the end of the week. I left her office feeling like I'd taken a concrete step instead of just reacting to whatever my mother did next. That afternoon, I met with my apartment building's property manager, showed her photos of my mother on my phone, explained this person wasn't welcome in the building under any circumstances, and police should be called if she appeared. The manager took it seriously, made notes in her system, offered to change my lock codes immediately. I accepted and she walked me through the new codes twice. The next day at work, my supervisor assigned me to a high-profile case involving federal fraud charges, the kind that could make or break a prosecutor's reputation. I threw myself into preparation, grateful for the distraction and the reminder of what I'd built. Thursday morning, my mother emailed again, this time with a softer tone saying she just wanted to reconnect and start fresh, making no mention of the invoice like that whole thing never happened. I recognized the manipulation tactic immediately. Pressure, then retreat, then pressure again, wearing people down until they gave in. I didn't respond, following Phyllis's advice to maintain no contact while we prepared the legal letter. Friday afternoon, Rachel called me at work, which she never did. I answered worried something had happened to my grandmother. Instead, she told me my mother had shown up at her house an hour ago, pounding on the door and demanding to know what Rachel had been telling me. Rachel refused to engage and told my mother to leave, but my mother stood on the porch for 20 minutes, yelling about betrayal before finally driving away. I felt guilty that my boundary setting was affecting Rachel, pulling her into conflict she didn't deserve. She cut me off firmly. This isn't your fault. I can handle your mother. You need to stop taking responsibility for other people's bad behavior. Monday morning, Phyllis emailed me the completed cease and desist letter. I read through it twice. Legal language clear and firm, establishing that I was requesting no contact except written communication regarding my grandmother's welfare, and that violations would result in legal action, including potential restraining orders. The letter listed specific incidents with dates: the doorstep visit, the invoice email, the harassment at Rachel's house. I sent Phyllis my approval, and she responded she'd send it via certified mail today. For 3 days after that, I felt like I was holding my breath. Every phone buzz made me jump. Every unfamiliar email made my heart race. I checked the tracking number obsessively. Rachel called Wednesday evening and reminded me the waiting was part of the process, that I was doing everything right, that I couldn't control how my mother responded, but could control how I protected myself. Thursday afternoon, the tracking showed my mother signed for the certified letter at 2:47 p.m. By 6:15 p.m., my inbox pinged with an email from her. Subject line: legal threats from my own daughter. The email ran long and messy, jumping between how hurt she felt and claims I was using my legal training to bully my own mother. She wrote about sacrificing everything raising me, and this was how I repaid her, how I was breaking her heart and destroying the family. Then accused me of turning Rachel against her, of poisoning my grandmother's mind. The worst part hit when I scrolled down. She'd copied Danny, 3 aunts, 2 uncles, and my grandmother on the email, clearly trying to get everyone on her side. I screenshot everything immediately and forwarded to Phyllis with a note asking if this counted as violating the letter. Within 20 minutes, my phone started buzzing with email notifications as people began replying. My uncle Robert replied first, telling my mother that legal boundaries were reasonable and she needed to respect them. My uncle James added that maybe everyone should take a step back. My grandmother asked everyone to please handle this privately, instead of through group emails. 2 aunts didn't respond at all. Danny replied saying we should all talk this through as a family, his usual middle ground approach. Saturday morning, Danny emailed me separately from his personal account instead of replying to the group thread. He wrote that my mother had been crying for 2 days straight and was threatening to show up at my office if I didn't respond soon. The email made me feel guilty for about 30 seconds before I remembered I'd spent 9 years being the one abandoned with nobody worrying about me. I forwarded his email to Phyllis. A week later, Danny was served with papers. The fraud victim had already filed charges for wire fraud and misrepresentation. Wait, that's from a different story. Let me correct. A week later, I got a call from the building security guard. My mother had shown up at the Justice Department building trying to get upstairs to my office, claiming it was an emergency. Security followed protocol, asked her to wait while they contacted me. I confirmed she wasn't authorized. They escorted her out and called police when she refused to leave the lobby. The police report added to my documentation folder. Phyllis said we now had strong grounds to file for a restraining order. 2 weeks after the first cease and desist letter, I made the decision sitting at my desk, typing out an email to Phyllis, authorizing her to move forward with restraining order paperwork. She started preparing the petition using all our documented incidents: the emails, the police report, witness statements from Rachel and my grandmother. Danny moved into Rachel's guest room after finally giving notice at my mother's house. He started attending therapy twice a week, working through years of being caught in the middle. He called me one evening and told me his therapist was helping him see how much he'd enabled our mother's behavior by going along with it. We started meeting for coffee occasionally, 30-minute conversations at neutral locations where we talked about work and apartment hunting. Small steps toward being siblings again without the weight of our mother's expectations. The restraining order hearing got scheduled 3 weeks out. I prepared my testimony with Phyllis, practicing staying calm and factual when describing the harassment pattern. Gwendolyn continued being supportive at work, giving me flexibility for legal appointments while making sure my caseload stayed manageable. 2 days before the hearing, my phone rang from a number I didn't recognize. Danny's voice sounding stressed, telling me our mother was in the hospital asking for me. The automatic guilt hit like a wave. Then I paused and asked questions. What happened? Which hospital? What are the doctors saying? He hesitated before admitting she'd gone to the ER for chest pain, but tests came back clear. Just anxiety and stress. She was being discharged in a few hours. The manipulation became obvious, the urgency that didn't match the actual medical situation. I told him I hoped she got appropriate care for her anxiety, but I wouldn't be visiting. The hearing day arrived. I dressed carefully in a navy suit, pulling my hair back, looking every bit the federal prosecutor I was. Phyllis met me outside the courtroom, and we reviewed strategy one more time. The room was smaller than I expected, just a judge's bench and a few rows of seats. My mother arrived representing herself and sat across the aisle, not looking at me. When my turn came, I walked to the witness stand and took the oath, voice steady even though my hands were shaking. I testified clearly about the pattern of harassment, the doorstep visit, the invoice, the police report, the violations of the cease and desist. Phyllis guided me through each incident with questions that let me lay out the timeline chronologically. My mother tried to interrupt twice, but the judge told her to wait her turn. When Phyllis finished, my mother got to ask questions. She tried to paint me as vindictive, asking why I was doing this when she was my mother. I kept my answers short and factual. I'm here because you violated boundaries repeatedly, despite being asked to stop. Phyllis presented our documentation: emails, photos, police reports. Rachel's written statement described the scene on her lawn. My grandmother's statement confirmed my mother tried to use her as a go-between. The judge read through everything carefully. My mother got her chance to speak, talked about how I was her daughter and she just wanted to reconnect, how she didn't mean any harm, how I was using my legal training to bully her. The judge listened without expression, then asked specific questions about the cease and desist letter, about showing up at Rachel's house after being told to stay away. My mother stumbled through her answers, contradicting herself twice. The judge took a 5-minute recess to review materials. Those 5 minutes felt like an hour. When she came back, the judge started speaking in a calm, measured tone. She granted a 1-year restraining order with specific provisions. My mother must stay at least 500 feet from my home, workplace, and any location she knows I frequent. Cannot contact me directly through any means. Can only contact through her attorney, and only regarding genuine emergencies involving my grandmother. The judge explained violations would result in immediate arrest and potential jail time, that my mother needed to take this order very seriously. Relief washed through me as the judge spoke, finally having legal protection with real consequences instead of just requests my mother could ignore. My mother stood, her chair scraping loudly, and walked out without looking back. Phyllis squeezed my shoulder. You did great. The order is solid and enforceable. Rachel was waiting in the hallway. We drove to a quiet restaurant and ordered sandwiches neither of us really tasted. Rachel teared up when I thanked her for everything. The years of support, the documentation, showing up today. We toasted with our water glasses to chosen family and boundaries that actually stick. The relief over the next few days was almost physical, like I'd been holding my breath for months and could finally exhale. Work stabilized immediately because the constant fear of my mother appearing was gone. I threw myself into cases with energy I hadn't had in weeks. 2 months later, Danny called to invite me to see his new apartment. He'd moved out of Rachel's guest room after saving enough for first and last month's rent. Small studio in an older building. Nothing fancy but clean and his. We ordered pizza and ate sitting on his floor since he only had one chair. He thanked me for not completely shutting him out despite his role in the family mess. I told him I was glad he was building his own life separate from our mother's control. My grandmother and I fell into a routine of quiet dinners at her house every other week, just the two of us without drama. We talked about her book club and my cases, and it was peaceful in a way family gatherings never were. 6 months after the Thanksgiving revelation, I was sitting in a meeting with my supervisor, and she was talking about my performance on the high-profile case we'd won. Mentioned potential for advancement, maybe a lead position on the next major case. I realized sitting there that protecting my boundaries had freed up mental energy that made me better at my job. My reputation at work was solid, built on successful cases and thorough preparation. Danny texted saying he'd enrolled in 2 classes for next semester. My grandmother sent me a card about how proud she was. The restraining order sat in my file cabinet with 0 violations. 3 weeks later, Danny texted that our mother had sold the house and moved into a small apartment across town, gotten a job at a retail store, seemed focused on paying off debts. I read the message twice, waiting for some big feeling, but all I got was quiet acknowledgement that consequences were real. Rachel called on Friday and invited me to dinner the following week. Danny and my grandmother were coming too. I stopped at the wine shop on my way over and picked out something nicer than usual. We ate Rachel's lasagna and talked about my grandmother's book club and Danny's apartment furniture and Rachel's garden plans. After dinner, we played cards at the kitchen table for 2 hours. Danny made jokes about my grandmother's card counting skills, and nobody kept score. My grandmother said this was what family dinners should feel like, and we all agreed without needing to say more. I drove home that night feeling settled in a way I didn't know was possible with family. YouTube just dropped this new hype feature. If you're hooked on this story, smash that hype button. It tells YouTube this video deserves to blow up, and it keeps even crazier stories coming your way. Story 6. This story is titled, My Parents Threatened to Cut Me Off If I Didn't Pay My Sister's Debt. I called their bluff and went no contact. Hey everyone, before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. Hey everyone, been hanging around here for a while, but I've never really shared anything before. I didn't think I'd ever have a reason to, but my family has officially pushed me to my limit. I need to hear what other people think. It feels like no matter what I do, I'm always painted as the bad guy, and honestly, I'm exhausted. So here's what's been going on. I'm 30, male now, and I've been on my own since I was 18. When I say on my own, I mean it. Financially, emotionally, you name it. My parents? Let's just say they're not exactly winning any awards for parenting or sibling support. They weren't the kind of parents who cheered you on or made you feel like you were special. Instead, they had this unspoken rule that shaped my entire childhood. My younger sister, Anna, could do no wrong, while I was expected to be the responsible one. If Anna messed up, and believe me, she messed up a lot, it was brushed under the rug. She's just sensitive, my mom would say. Or, she'll learn eventually, which was code for, let's pretend this never happened and hope she figures it out. Meanwhile, if I so much as stumbled, it was like the sky was falling. Why aren't you trying harder? You need to set a better example for your sister. It didn't matter what I did. It was never enough. I could bring home a report card full of A's, and they'd ask why I didn't get an A+ in math. But Anna? She could barely pass, and it was, at least you're doing your best, sweetie. That dynamic didn't stop when we became adults. If anything, it got worse. Anna stayed under my parents' roof until she was in her mid-20s, bouncing from one failed job to the next and always finding some excuse for why it wasn't her fault. Meanwhile, I was out here working 2 part-time jobs to pay my way through college, figuring out how to manage rent and bills on my own. Not once did they offer to help me. Not that I expected them to, but it stung watching them bend over backward for Anna while I was left to fend for myself. Anyway, fast forward to 6 months ago. My mom called me. Now, you have to understand, my mom doesn't call just to chat. She doesn't call to check in or say hi. When she calls, it's because she needs something. You know the kind of call I'm talking about. The one that starts with overly sweet small talk, like they're trying to butter you up before dropping the real reason they're calling. That's exactly what happened. She started with, "How's work? Are you still at that company? Have you been eating well?" It was so out of character that I knew something was coming. My mom doesn't care how I'm eating. She doesn't even know what I do for a living beyond something with computers. The whole conversation felt fake, like she was trying too hard to sound casual. Then she hit me with it. Anna's in trouble. I wasn't surprised. Anna always seems to be in trouble, but I wasn't expecting this. Apparently, Anna had racked up $40,000 in debt, and not the kind of debt you can laugh off as youthful stupidity, like student loans or maxed out credit cards. No, she had borrowed from some seriously shady people, and now they were getting serious about wanting their money back. My mom's voice cracked like she was about to cry, which I'm sure she thought would make me cave. She didn't waste any time piling on the guilt. You've done so well for yourself. You've always been the strong one. Anna's not like you. She needs your help. I sat there for a moment, trying to process what she'd just said. 40 grand? How does someone even manage to rack up that kind of debt? I asked her how it happened, half expecting some ridiculous excuse, and my mom brushed it off. That doesn't matter right now, she said, like I was focusing on the wrong thing. What matters is that she's your sister. Family helps family. That line, family helps family, has been their go-to excuse for years. It's what they said every time they needed me to fix something for Anna, cover for her, or clean up whatever mess she'd made. And every time I'd swallowed my frustration and done what they asked because I didn't want to be the bad guy. But this? $40,000? I couldn't do it. Not this time. I told her no. Straight up. I said, "I'm sorry, but I can't bail Anna out of a mess she created." And just like that, the tone of the conversation shifted. My mom went from pitiful to pissed in about 2 seconds flat. "You're being selfish," she started to yell. "You're abandoning your family when they need you most." She even threw in, "Do you want her blood on your hands?" As if Anna's poor life choices were somehow my responsibility. At that point, I hung up. I couldn't listen to it anymore. My hands were shaking, and my chest felt tight, but I knew I'd made the right decision. I've worked too hard to let someone else's bad choices drag me down. Still, the guilt started creeping in almost immediately. My family has a way of twisting things to make me feel like the bad guy, and this time was no different. Even though I said no, I can't shake the feeling that maybe I made the wrong call. Standing up to my family felt like the right thing in the moment, but now I'm stuck wondering if I've just made everything worse. What if they're right? What if I'm being selfish? And honestly, I still don't know what's coming next. That call was just the start, and what happened afterward caught me completely off guard. I have a feeling this isn't over, but I'll fill you all in as things unfold. I'll post an update soon. Update 1. Hey guys, so I thought things might cool down for a bit. Maybe she'd stew for a while and then let it go. Turns out I was way off. The drama ramped up hard, and honestly, I wasn't ready for it. It's been a total mess, and I'm still trying to figure out how to deal with it. Let me break it down. So, after I hung up on my mom, things went from bad to worse. I knew she wouldn't let it go, but I wasn't prepared for the sheer level of guilt-tripping and harassment that followed. My phone was blowing up constantly. First, it was my mom with texts like, "We raised you better than this," and "You'll regret turning your back on your family." Then my dad jumped in with his 2 cents, even though he's usually the silent type. His messages were short and to the point, like, "You're better than this," or "Do the right thing." But Anna? Oh, Anna went all out. She sent me this long, whiny text about how her life was falling apart and how she didn't deserve to be abandoned. She threw in stuff like, "I've always looked up to you, and now you're just leaving me to suffer?" And, "You're rich. It's not like $40,000 would even make a dent for you." That made me laugh, Rich. Let me tell you, just because I'm not living paycheck to paycheck doesn't mean I'm swimming in cash. The entitlement in her tone was unbelievable. I didn't reply to any of them. I thought maybe if I ignored it, they'd realize I wasn't going to budge and just let it go. A couple of days later, I got a call from my aunt. She's one of the few family members I actually get along with. So I picked up. She sounded awkward, like she didn't want to be making the call, but felt like she had to. She said my mom had been telling everyone in the family that I was refusing to help Anna and that I was letting her sink. According to my mom, Anna's life was in danger, and I was just standing by watching it happen. My aunt didn't believe all of it, but she wanted to hear my side. I explained the whole situation, including the part where Anna got herself into this mess and expected me to magically fix it. My aunt was shocked but supportive. She told me I wasn't wrong to say no, and that Anna needed to face the consequences of her actions. Hearing that helped a little, but the damage was already done. My mom had spread the story far and wide, twisting it to make me look like the villain. I started getting texts from cousins, uncles, and even a couple of old family friends. Most of them were vague, like, "You should really think about what family means," or "You'll regret this one day." Some were outright nasty. One of my cousins called me selfish and said I was acting like I was too good for the family. I ignored them all, but the constant barrage was exhausting. And then things escalated. One afternoon, I got a call from my bank. At first, I thought it was a scam because who actually gets calls from their bank? But the guy on the line explained that someone had tried to access my accounts using fake identification. They flagged it as suspicious because the documents didn't match up. And thankfully, nothing was taken. I immediately knew who was behind it. Anna. It had to be her. She was desperate. And if she was willing to drag the entire family into this, why wouldn't she try to steal from me? I asked the bank for more details, but they couldn't tell me much other than that they'd locked my accounts temporarily as a precaution. I thanked them and hung up, but I was furious. This wasn't just guilt-tripping or emotional manipulation anymore. This was criminal. I need answers, so I am thinking of confronting Anna directly. What would you guys do if you were in my place? Thanks for sticking around. I'll keep you updated. Update 2. Hey again. Y'all been waiting for the confrontation news. Sorry for being late. Hear how it went. After I decided to confront Anna, I was still fuming when I pulled up to her apartment later that evening. I hadn't told her I was coming, and honestly, I wasn't even sure what I was going to say. All I knew was that I needed to look her in the eye and hear her admit what she'd done. Maybe a part of me hoped she'd deny it. Give me some reason to believe my sister wasn't the type of person who'd stoop this low. When she opened the door, she looked surprised to see me, but not in a "what are you doing here" kind of way. It was more like she'd been expecting me to show up eventually. She was wearing sweats, and her hair was a mess, like she'd just rolled out of bed. Not that I cared about her appearance, but it added to the whole vibe of, I don't have my life together. "What are you doing here?" she asked, leaning against the doorframe like this was some casual visit. I didn't even bother easing into it. "Did you try to steal from me?" I asked, holding up my phone with the bank alert still on the screen. My voice was probably louder than it needed to be, but I couldn't help it. I was pissed. Her face froze for a second, and I thought, maybe she'll lie. Maybe she'll try to deny it. But no. Instead, she rolled her eyes like I was overreacting and said, "Oh, come on. You weren't going to help me, so what choice did I have?" What? Choice? The did? She? Have? I stared at her, dumbfounded. "Do you even hear yourself? You tried to steal from me because I wouldn't bail you out of your own mess. That's not just wrong, Anna. That's illegal." She shrugged. Actually shrugged. Like we were talking about borrowing a sweater or something. "Mom and Dad said you'd come around eventually," she said, crossing her arms. "They told me to push you harder, that you'd cave if I made it serious enough." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You've got to be kidding me," I said. "They encouraged you to do this? To commit fraud? Do you even realize how insane that sounds?" "They didn't tell me to commit fraud," she said. "They just said you wouldn't let me sink if you thought I was really in trouble. And guess what? I am in trouble. I don't have anyone else to turn to." I was so angry, I could barely think straight. "You don't have anyone else to turn to because you've burned every bridge you've ever had," I shouted. "This isn't just about the money, Anna. It's about the fact that you've never taken responsibility for anything in your life. And now you're dragging me into your mess because you're too selfish to deal with the consequences of your own actions." She didn't even flinch. "You're being dramatic," waving me off. "It's not like I actually got anything from you. The bank stopped it, didn't they? So what's the big deal?" "The big deal," I said, "is that you tried. The big deal is that you thought you had the right to steal from me just because you're too lazy to clean up your own mess. And the even bigger deal is that Mom and Dad think this is okay." That finally seemed to get under her skin. Her face twisted into this mix of anger and embarrassment, but instead of apologizing, she doubled down. "You think you're so much better than me, don't you?" she spat. "Just because you've got your fancy job and your stupid house, you think you can sit there and judge me? Well, guess what, big brother? You wouldn't be where you are without Mom and Dad. They sacrificed everything for us, and this is how you repay them?" I laughed, but it wasn't a happy laugh. It was the kind of laugh that comes out when you're so frustrated you don't know what else to do. "Mom and Dad didn't sacrifice anything for me," I said. I paid rent at 18. I put myself through college. Every sacrifice they made was for you, Anna. They handed you everything on a silver platter while I was left to figure things out on my own. So don't even try to pull the family loyalty card with me. She didn't have a response to that. Or maybe she did, but she didn't say it out loud. Instead, she just stood there, glaring at me like I was the bad guy in all of this. I couldn't take it anymore. You know what? I said, stepping back toward the door. I'm done. I'm done with you. I'm done with mom and dad. And I'm done with this entire toxic family dynamic. You want to ruin your shitty life? Fine. But you're not taking me down with you. I left before she could say anything else. On the drive home, my hands were gripping the steering wheel so hard that my knuckles were white. I was angry, sure. But more than that, I was hurt. Not just by Anna, but by my parents too. How could they think this was okay? How could they justify encouraging her to pull something like this? When I got home, I sat down and made a list of all the things I needed to do to protect myself. I called my bank to double-check that my accounts were secure. I changed all my passwords. I even called a lawyer friend to ask what my options were if Anna tried something like this again. He told me I could press charges if I wanted to, but I wasn't ready to go that far. Yet. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying the conversation in my head, wondering if I could have handled it differently. But deep down, I knew the truth. No matter what I said or did, Anna wouldn't change. And as long as my parents kept enabling her, she'd never have to. After the confrontation with Anna, I thought things couldn't get worse. I mean, how much lower could they sink? Turns out I underestimated my family's talent for making bad situations even worse. It started about a week later. My parents showed up at my house. No call, no text, just them standing on my porch like they owned the place. I debated not answering the door, but I figured they'd just keep ringing the bell until I caved. So, I opened it. My mom didn't even bother with a greeting. She shoved past me like she was entitled to be there, her face red with anger. My dad followed her inside, looking uncomfortable, but clearly there to back her up. I closed the door, took a deep breath, and braced myself. "This has gone far enough," my mom yelled, spinning around to face me. "We need to talk." I crossed my arms. "I think we've already said everything that needs to be said." "No, we haven't," she said. "You need to stop this nonsense and help your sister. She's family. She's your responsibility." I stared at her, absolutely dumbfounded. My responsibility? She got me pissed off. Anna is a grown adult who got herself into this mess. I'm not her parent, and I'm certainly not her ATM. My mom's face twisted in frustration. "Do you think we like asking you for help? Do you think this is easy for us? This is about family loyalty. You don't just abandon your family when things get tough." I laughed bitterly. "You mean the loyalty you showed when you charged me rent at 18? Or when you made me pay for my own college while Anna got everything handed to her? Or how about when you let her screw up over and over again and just expected me to fix it?" "Yeah, no thanks." My dad finally spoke up, his voice low and serious. "Do you think we've had an easy life, raising 2 kids and trying to give you both the best we could? We sacrificed so much for you." "Stop," I said, cutting him off. "Just stop. Every sacrifice you made was for Anna. Every time something went wrong, you bent over backward to fix it for her while I had to fend for myself. And you know what? That's fine. I don't need your help, and I never have. But don't stand here and lecture me about loyalty when you've been enabling her bad behavior for years." My mom's face turned bright red, and I could tell she was about to lose it. "If you don't help her, you're going to regret it for the rest of your life," she hissed. "Do you want her to end up on the streets? Do you want her blood on your hands?" And there it was. The same guilt trip she'd tried to pull during that phone call. I felt my blood boiling. I just didn't understand their logic. "I'm not responsible for what happens to Anna," I said. "She made her choices. If she ends up on the streets, that's on her. And on you for never teaching her how to be accountable for her actions." My mom was practically shaking with rage at this point. "Fine," she spat. "If this is the kind of person you want to be, don't expect us to be there for you when you need us." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I've never needed you," I said coldly. "And after this, I never will." For a moment, the room was dead silent. My dad looked like he wanted to say something, but he didn't. My mom just glared at me, her chest heaving like she was about to explode. Then, without another word, she turned on her heel and stormed out. My dad followed her, but he paused at the door to give me one last look, a mix of disappointment and something else I couldn't quite place. Maybe regret. Then he left too. As soon as the door closed behind them, I felt this overwhelming sense of relief. I didn't care about their approval or their guilt trips or their toxic idea of family loyalty. I was done. But of course they weren't. The next day I got an email from my mom. It was long and rambling, full of the usual guilt-tripping nonsense. She accused me of being ungrateful and cruel. She said I was abandoning my family in their time of need and that I'd broken her heart. She even hinted that she and my dad might cut me out of their will, like that was supposed to scare me into submission. I didn't respond. What was the point? Then Anna started up again. She sent me this dramatic text about how she was losing everything and how it was all my fault. She said she'd had to sell her car, that she was behind on rent, and that she was being harassed by her creditors. Honestly, I didn't feel bad. She dug her own hole. Now she had to deal with it. A few days later, I got a letter in the mail, not from my family, but from a lawyer. My parents were threatening to sue me. The letter claimed I had a moral obligation to support Anna, and that I'd irreparably harmed the family by refusing to help. It was laughable, really. I forwarded the letter to my own lawyer, who assured me it was complete garbage. They didn't have a leg to stand on, and nothing would come of it. But the fact that they even tried, that was it for me. I was done. Done with Anna, done with my parents, done with the whole toxic family dynamic. I blocked their numbers, deleted them from social media, and told the few relatives I still spoke to that I wasn't interested in hearing anything about my parents or Anna. Most of them understood, though a couple tried to convince me to find a way to make peace. I shut that down real quick. Peace wasn't possible with people who saw me as nothing more than a safety net for Anna's bad decisions. Here where I am right now, I feel miserable. Do you think it's normal for a family to go this far? Final update. Hello again. I decided to write a final update once I figure things out, so here goes. After sending that lawyer's letter straight to the trash and forwarding it to my lawyer just in case, I finally made a decision that had been creeping up on me for years. I was going no contact. Completely. Permanently. I'd been hanging on to some small, fragile hope that my family might change, but the lawyer stunt was proof enough. They weren't going to stop. If anything, they were doubling down on their toxic behavior, and I wasn't going to let them drag me any further into their chaos. So I went full-on block mode. My mom, my dad, Anna, everyone got the chop. Blocked their numbers, their emails, everything. Honestly, hitting that block button felt weirdly good. Then I went through my socials and wiped them off there too. No way was I leaving any doors open for them to sneak back in. I shot a quick text to the few family members I actually like, mostly cousins, letting them know I was done with the family drama and asking them not to play messenger for anyone. Most of them were cool about it. But of course, a couple hit me with the whole, "but they're your family," guilt trip. My response? Short and sweet. Being family doesn't mean you get to treat me like crap. The hardest part was explaining the situation to a few mutual friends who knew my parents. Some of them couldn't believe what I was telling them. Like, they literally couldn't wrap their heads around the fact that my parents and sister had tried to steal from me, guilt me, and now sue me. One friend even asked, "Are you sure there's not more to the story?" As if I'd somehow left out the part where this was all my fault. I felt awful, but I let it go. The people who mattered believed me, and that was enough. The first week of no contact was tough. Not because I missed them, I didn't, but because they didn't give up easily. Even with their numbers blocked, they found ways to get through. My mom started calling from unknown numbers, leaving these long, dramatic voicemails about how I was tearing the family apart. She'd say things like, "We just want to talk," or "You're punishing us for trying to do the right thing." It was exhausting. I didn't listen to most of the messages, just deleted them as soon as I realized who they were from. Then there were the letters. My parents must have gone straight from their lawyer's office to the post office, because the letters started coming almost immediately. At first, they were mostly nonsense. My mom writing pages and pages about how much she sacrificed for me and how I was breaking her heart. My dad chimed in too, though his letters were more direct. One of them actually said, "If you don't help Anna, don't expect us to ever forgive you." Forgive me? For what exactly? For not letting my sister steal from me? For not enabling her bad decisions? The sheer audacity of it was almost funny. By the second week, their messages went completely off the rails. My mom's letters turned desperate, almost unhinged, throwing out vague threats like, "You'll regret this one day," and "You'll be sorry when it's too late." It was all guilt and doom, like she was trying to scare me back into line. My dad, though, he didn't hold back. His letters were straight up venomous, calling me selfish, ungrateful, and arrogant. He ranted about how I'd forgotten where I came from, and was betraying the people who made you who you are. It wasn't just guilt anymore. It felt like they were trying to break me down, like they couldn't handle losing their grip on me. And then there was Anna. Oh, Anna didn't waste any time playing the victim. She sent me this long, handwritten letter, probably because she knew I'd block her emails, saying how much I'd hurt her, how she couldn't believe I'd abandon her in her time of need. She wrote stuff like, "You've always been my rock, and now you're just leaving me to drown." And, "I thought you cared about me, but clearly I was wrong." But I just couldn't believe her audacity. She ended the letter by asking for money again. Not $40,000 this time, just a small loan of $5,000 to help her get back on her feet. She even promised to pay me back as soon as things got better. I laughed so hard I nearly cried, like I was going to fall for that after everything she'd done. But my mom went on full crazy mode by showing up at my office. Yeah, she actually rolled up to my workplace unannounced. She stormed into the lobby, demanding to see me, and when the receptionist wouldn't budge, she lost it. She started yelling loud enough for the whole building to hear, calling me a horrible son, and screaming about how I was destroying the family. Security had to step in and physically escort her out. I stood there watching the whole thing from the mezzanine, completely frozen. My coworkers didn't say a word, but their faces? Pure shock. I wanted the ground to swallow me whole. That was it. I'd had enough. I wasn't just mad. I was done. That night, I contacted a family law attorney. Not the friend I'd casually consulted earlier, an actual pro. I laid out everything, the harassment, the entitlement, the insanity. She listened, asked a few sharp questions, and then told me exactly what I needed to do. The next day, we drafted a cease and desist letter. It went out to everyone, my mom, my dad, Anna, even their lawyer. It was crystal clear: contact me again and I'll take legal action. No exceptions. I didn't think they'd actually stop, but shockingly it worked. My mom's calls? Stopped. The nasty letters? Gone. Even Anna, queen of the guilt trip, went radio silent. Now, 6 months after cutting ties, life feels different. Quieter, lighter, and honestly, better. It wasn't easy, but choosing myself over the constant chaos of my family was the best decision I've ever made. Of course, not everyone gets it. A few relatives still hit me with the same tired line, but they're your family. You know what I say to that? Family doesn't mean squat if they don't respect you. Blood doesn't give anyone the right to wreck your peace. You don't owe anyone, your time, money, or sanity just because you share DNA. Boundaries aren't harsh. They're necessary. And honestly, cutting them off was the best thing I've ever done. With the drama behind me, I threw myself into work and finally got a promotion I'd been chasing for years. The little I've heard about Anna tells me she's still struggling. She's working part-time now and living with a friend after losing her apartment. I don't feel bad about it anymore. She made her bed. My parents? Still spreading their story to anyone who will listen, but fewer people are buying it these days. It's freeing not to care. I've also started reconnecting with people I'd lost touch with. Friends, a few cousins, and even opened up to someone I'm dating now. They've been incredibly supportive, and for the first time, I feel like I'm surrounded by people who genuinely respect me. To anyone dealing with a toxic family, I know how hard it is, but it gets better. Cutting them off felt like ripping off a Band-Aid, but the peace that followed was worth every painful moment. You owe it to yourself to choose peace, to choose you. Thanks for reading.